Chapter 13:17. Long Qing's calmness and indifference made the Dragon Emperor feel as if there was a stone in his heart. He would rather Long Qing yell at him or even scold him. He did not want Long Qing to talk to him like this. It was as if she was talking to a stranger. After all, he was Long Qing's father. Even though he was the great sage, the Dragon Emperor still could not remain calm in the face of his own daughter's indifference and calmness. Long Yang, who was at the side, also curled his lips helplessly at this time, not knowing what to say. The atmosphere instantly became a little awkward. However, at this moment, one of the 12 elders sitting on both sides of the hall suddenly stood up and shouted, "Impudent! He's your father. How can you be so rude?" This elder was one of the 12 elders of the Dragon Clan. His cultivation was at the half-step Great Sage realm, and his status was similar to Long Fun's. At this time, he was furious because of Long Qing's attitude and could not help but scold her. However, in the face of this elder's scolding, the Dragon Emperor had already spoken before Long Qing could speak. "It's my fault. I'll let Qing her down. Elder, please don't say anymore." Perhaps it was because of the guilt in his heart towards Long Qing. The Dragon Emperor took the initiative to speak up for Long Qing in the face of this elder's scolding. He had not fulfilled his responsibility as a father for so many years. At this time, the Dragon Emperor was unwilling to see Long Qing suffer the slightest grievance. However, this elder was obviously a stubborn person. In his opinion, there should be order in the hierarchy. Since Long Qing was a junior, how could she speak to her father with such an attitude? Therefore, after the Dragon Emperor spoke, not only did the elder not give in, but he also said unhappily, "Patriarch, there should be order in the hierarchy. As a daughter, how can you speak to your father like this?" This old man earnestly requests the Patriarch to punish Long Qing as a warning to others. Not only did he scold Long Qing, he even asked the Dragon Emperor to punish Long Qing. How could this be possible? Sure enough, after hearing this elder's words, the Dragon Emperor's face sank and said indifferently, "I've already said that this matter is my fault. I didn't take good care of Qing, since she was young. Third elder, this matter ends here." The old man was the third elder of the dragon race. Upon hearing the Dragon Emperor's words, the third elder didn't seem to sense the anger in the Dragon Emperor's words at all. "Patriarch, nothing can be accomplished without rules. Our dragon race." The third elder still wanted to argue with reason. When he saw the third elder acting this way, the other old man beside him gently tugged on his sleeve. However, the third elder was completely undecided. In response, the old man could only shake his head and laugh bitterly. Everyone present knew that the third elder was a typical one-track-minded person. He was old and stubborn, but he dealt with things fairly. Therefore, the third elder had been in charge of the Dragon Clan's punishment hall since a long time ago, and was in charge of the punishment of the Dragon Clan. Perhaps it was because the third elder had become more and more stubborn after being in charge of punishment. As long as he thought that something was against punishment, he would never give in. Even the Dragon Emperor's words had no effect on him. This was the stone in the latrine. It was smelly and hard. If it were any other time, the Dragon Emperor obviously wouldn't lower himself to the third elder's level. Besides, the third elder didn't have anything to say when he did things. But today was different. No matter how Long Qing behaved, the Dragon Emperor wouldn't blame Long Qing. He wouldn't even allow anyone to blame Long Qing either. After so many years, it wasn't easy for him to see his daughter again. The Dragon Emperor wouldn't allow anyone to make Long Qing feel wronged, not even the third elder who held a high position. "That's enough, third elder. Didn't you hear what I said? I said that this is the end of it." Patriarch, the Dragon Emperor was already fuming. However, the third elder still wanted to refute. But this time, before the third elder could say anything, the Dragon Emperor's eyes glinted with a cold glint, and he bellowed, "Get lost!" The Dragon Emperor couldn't hide his anger anymore after the third elder repeatedly tried to punish Long Qing. Along with his bellow, a dragon roar resounded in the hall. Xiao Chun and the other three felt deafened and dizzy. The might of the great sage's bellow was unbearable for Xiao Chun and the other three. Seeing that Longqing was on the verge of collapsing, the Dragon Emperor couldn't care less about anything else. He immediately stepped forward and supported Longqing. I'll give you 3 breaths at a time. If you don't get lost, don't blame me for being rude. While supporting Longqing, the Dragon Emperor swept a cold glance at everyone present. It was obvious that the Dragon Emperor was truly enraged. At this moment, all the elders present disappeared from the large hall without any hesitation. Even the 3rd elder was forcefully dragged out of the large hall by Long Fun and another elder. After everyone left, only the Dragon Emperor, Xiao Chun, and the other 4 were left in the hall. At that moment, Longqing returned to her senses and took the initiative to break free from the Dragon Emperor's embrace. Upon sensing Longqing's struggle, the loneliness in the Dragon Emperor's eyes intensified. His own daughter was actually so defensive and resistant against him. In an instant, the Dragon Emperor's feelings were indescribable. After letting go of Longqing silently, the Dragon Emperor turned around and walked to the main seat. But before he took 2 steps, Longqing's voice sounded behind him. I'm still not used to it. I'm sorry, Fa. Father. Upon hearing Longqing's father, the Dragon Emperor turned around abruptly and looked at Longqing in surprise. Needless to say, the excitement in his eyes went without saying. To be able to make the great sage lose his composure, it went to show how much Longqing's father had touched the Dragon Emperor. Facing the Dragon Emperor's gaze, Longqing blushed and didn't dare to look him in the eye. As mentioned earlier, Longqing didn't have the slightest bit of hatred toward the dragon race and the Dragon Emperor. The reason why she appeared so indifferent was definitely related to Longqing's personality. Longqing had always been indifferent to outsiders, so it wasn't her fault. However, after interacting with the Dragon Emperor for a short while, Longqing felt a strong sense of care and concern from the Dragon Emperor. This kind of care and concern was not an act, but came from the bottom of his heart. The Dragon Emperor was indeed a father who loved his daughter dearly and blamed himself. Longqing was slightly moved by his strong fatherly love. But with her personality, it was obviously impossible for her to accept him as her father right away. But the fact that Longqing could say such words proved that there were some changes in her state of mind. Upon seeing Longqing lowering her head shyly, the Dragon Emperor stared blankly for a few moments before bursting into laughter. Ha ha ha! Don't worry, Qing. Father knows that you've suffered all these years. But from now on, Father will definitely not let you suffer any more grievances. No one will let you suffer. Ha ha! Okay. Collectible monthly votes recommendations. Chapter 13:18. When Longqing called him father, the haze in Dragon Emperor's heart was swept away. His hearty laughter echoed in the hall. Hearing Dragon Emperor's laughter, Longqing, who had her head lowered, had a different feeling in her heart. Although Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing treated Longqing like their own daughter, and Longqing also treated them as her own parents, some blood ties could not be made up for. As for Longqing and the Dragon Emperor, they were truly father and daughter. Blood was thicker than water. Even if their bones were broken, their tendons were still connected. This kind of feeling was obviously something that Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing could not give. Second sister, congratulations. At this moment, Xiao Chun whispered in Longqing's ear. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Longqing rolled her eyes, but did not say anything. Her previous conflicting feelings had obviously faded a lot. Just when the siblings were joking, Long Yang curled his lips and said to Feng Ju, "See, I told you I'm not your biological father. Look how you treat your father when you come back." Dragon Emperor did not even look at Long Yang from the moment he entered the hall. His whole heart was filled with Longqing. Hearing Long Yang's jealous words, Dragon Emperor's gaze finally landed on him. His smile instantly disappeared, and he shouted angrily, "Little brat, what are you saying? Why? Do you have a problem with father treating Qing or like this?" "No, how would I dare? I'm saying father did a good job. Sister must have suffered a lot after wandering outside for so many years. What I mean is, not only father, but also I, as her brother, must take good care of her and not let her suffer. Facing Dragon Emperor's scolding, Long Yang immediately changed his expression and smiled embarrassedly. The speed at which Long Yang changed his expression was really amazing. But seeing this, the Dragon Emperor's expression softened a little. That's for the best. If I find out that you dare to bully Qing, I'll skin you alive. After saying that, Dragon Emperor ignored Long Yang and turned to look at Long Qing again. At the same time, the originally cold expression on his face instantly turned into a warm smile. As expected of father and son, Long Yang's change of expression was definitely learned from Dragon Emperor. The father and son's change of expression was simply like flipping a page in a book, catching people off guard. Qing, don't worry and stay here. This will be your home in the future. If there's anything, you can tell father. Don't be afraid. His attitude towards Long Qing was extremely gentle, completely different from Long Yang. It was as if he was knocking a porcelain doll, afraid that it would break if he used too much force. The dignified dragon race patriarch, a dignified great saint emperor. Fortunately, there were no outsiders present at this time. Otherwise, if others saw the Dragon Emperor's current appearance, their jaws would have dropped in shock. Hearing Dragon Emperor's words, Long Qing nodded and said, "Fa father, this is my little brother. He wants to enter the culvert of 10,000 arts to cultivate." Long Qing was still a little unaccustomed to being called father, but for the sake of Xiao Chun, he had no choice but to say it, so he could only bite the bullet. He knew how important the culvert of 10,000 arts was to Xiao Chun. In 3 months, Xiao Chun would have a life-and-death battle with Bai Qiran. Whether or not he could enter the culvert of 10,000 arts would determine the outcome of the battle. Because of the importance of the culvert of 10,000 arts, Long Qing had no choice but to ask Dragon Emperor for permission. He originally thought that it would take a lot of persuasion. After all, the culvert of 10,000 arts was an extremely famous cultivation mystic realm in the Dragon Clan. The requirements to enter were naturally not low. However, Long Qing had clearly underestimated his importance in Dragon Emperor's heart, especially since this was the first time Long Qing had asked him for permission. Therefore, Dragon Emperor nodded with a smile and agreed without any hesitation. Sure. Don't worry, Qing. It's a piece of cake. I'll do it for you right away." The Dragon Emperor naturally wouldn't reject Long Qing's favor. As soon as he finished speaking, the Dragon Emperor turned to look at Xiao Chun. At the same time, the smile on his face disappeared in an instant. Once again, he put on that lofty, majestic, and proud look. Xiao Chun was really speechless when he saw Dragon Emperor's sudden change in expression. Was this guy wearing a mask? He was talking to Long Qing, Long Yang, and himself with 3 completely different faces. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, Dragon Emperor was the great sage and Long Qing's biological father. Therefore, even though he was depressed, Xiao Chun still cupped his hands and bowed. Junior Xiao Chun pays his respects to Senior. Xiao Chun was still polite. Seeing this, Dragon Emperor nodded slightly and said indifferently, "Since you're Qing's younger brother, you don't have to call me Senior. Call me Uncle. Take this token. I'll get someone to bring you to the culvert of 10,000 arts later. You can cultivate for as long as you want." Perhaps it was because of Long Qing, but no matter what, Dragon Emperor's attitude towards Xiao Chun was quite good. At least he took advantage of the fact that Xiao Chun and Long Qing were siblings. Dragon Emperor threw his personal token to Xiao Chun. With this token, Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't have any problems entering the culvert of 10,000 arts if he wanted to. After receiving the token, Xiao Chun shouted, "Thank you, Uncle." After receiving the token, Dragon Emperor acted swiftly. He quickly got someone to bring Xiao Chun to the culvert of 10,000 arts. As for Long Qing, she naturally lived with Dragon Emperor and Long Yang. The largest mansion in Dragon City was the residence of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. There were only a dozen or so people in the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. The older generation consisted of Dragon Emperor, Long Fun, and his 2 brothers. The younger generation had more people, but there were only 15 of them. In total, there were only 18 people. It was difficult for her to adapt to life in the Dragon Clan. Therefore, After arranging for Xiao Chun to enter the culvert of 10,000 arts and returning to her mansion, Long Qing used the excuse of being tired to rest. Dragon Emperor naturally ordered people to take good care of her. He had already arranged maids and guards for Long Qing. After Long Qing rested, Dragon Emperor and Long Yang came to the study and sat down. Dragon Emperor looked at Long Yang and asked indifferently, "What do you think of Qing O's brother? Brother Xiao Chun?" "Yes, father. Do you think that brother Xiao Chun is not fit to be sister's brother?" Dragon Emperor took the initiative to ask about Xiao Chun. Long Yang quickly understood his father's meaning. It seemed that Dragon Emperor felt that Xiao Chun was not fit to be so close to Long Qing. Now that Long Qing had acknowledged her ancestors and returned to the Dragon Clan, Long Qing was the princess of the Dragon Clan. Xiao Chun had no status in the human clan. Therefore, Dragon Emperor felt that Xiao Chun was not fit to be so close to Long Qing. As for why Dragon Emperor was so gentle to Xiao Chun, it was because he was afraid that Long Qing would dislike him. After all, Long Qing had finally accepted him a little. How could Dragon Emperor make Long Qing dislike him again because of Xiao Chun? Now that Long Qing was not around, Dragon Emperor naturally did not hide his thoughts and spoke his mind. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1319. The Dragon Emperor originally looked down on Xiao Chun because Xiao Chun wasn't a native of the Central World and didn't have a powerful background. The Dragon Emperor also knew a little about the Sacred Palace. Although the Sacred Palace was a quasi-sage sect, Xiao Chun's group of 4 was only at the initial stage of the quasi-sage realm. In the Central World, the Sacred Palace wasn't considered a powerful quasi-sage sect and naturally didn't attract the Dragon Emperor's attention. This was Xiao Chun's identity and status. The Dragon Emperor didn't know much about Xiao Chun, but he was sure that Xiao Chun wasn't a chosen on the saint rankings. If he wasn't even a chosen on the saint rankings, it was even more impossible for the Dragon Emperor to pay attention to him. How could the Dragon Emperor take a fancy to someone who didn't have a background and wasn't a chosen on the saint rankings? To be honest, the Dragon Emperor would have driven Xiao Chun away if he wasn't afraid of angering Long Qing. However, what the Dragon Emperor didn't expect was that Long Yang smiled and said, "Father, you're wrong this time. Brother Xiao Chun isn't simple." The Dragon Emperor was slightly taken aback when he heard Long Yang's words. Then, he looked at Long Yang, clearly indicating for him to continue. Facing his father's gaze, Long Yang said unhurriedly, "Although Xiao Chun doesn't have a foundation in the Central World, I can guarantee that Xiao Chun's talent is very high. The Tianyin and Taiyang sects have already tested Xiao Chun's talent, and Yin Yangzi values Xiao Chun very much. Although I don't know how much talent Xiao Chun has, he is at least on the same level as me. Therefore, father, brother Xiao Chun will definitely be extraordinary in the future. Moreover, I think it won't be long before father sees brother Xiao Chun on the saint rankings." Since his talent was at the same level as Long Yang's, did that mean that Xiao Chun's talent was at least at the level of 99 meters? Hearing his son's words, Dragon Emperor was slightly taken aback. If that was the case, then Xiao Chun really couldn't be underestimated. After all, in the entire Central World, only Long Yang and the other 2 were known to have a talent of 99 meters. If Xiao Chun really had the talent of being 99 meters tall, then even if he didn't have any background, he would definitely have great achievements in the future. He could even become the leader of the younger generation of the human race. There was no doubt about this. The human race had been weak in the Central World for a long time. Although they could barely be considered a large race, their status was very awkward. They were neither superior nor inferior. Compared to the weak races, the human clan was indeed very powerful. However, compared to the powerful races like the Beast Clan, the Demon Clan, and the Ghost Clan, the human clan was much weaker. Therefore, the human clan was in an awkward position in the Central World. In order to break this situation, the easiest way for the human clan to do so was to start from a younger generation, or rather, from the saint rankings. After all, the chosen on the hallowed rankings was a very special existence. especially after receiving the protection of the will of the heavens. The hallowed rankings was practically equivalent to an independent, small battlefield. Only the younger generation could fight, and the experts of the older generation could not interfere. If the human clan could rush into the top 5 of the Saint rankings, or even be on par with Long Yang and the other two, then the human clan situation would definitely improve a lot. Therefore, if Long Yang was right, then Yin Yangzi and the others would definitely attach great importance to Shao Chun. From another perspective, they would become Shao Chun's foundation and backing in the central world. He didn't expect Shao Chun to be so talented. After pondering for a while, the Dragon Emperor's attitude towards Shao Chun gradually changed. Of course, if he wanted the Dragon Emperor to take him seriously, Shao Chun still had to work hard. At the very least, he had to display his true talent. Seeing the change in his father's expression, Long Yang smiled and said, "Father, why don't you wait and see? When Brother Shao Chun comes out of the culvert of 10,000 arts, you should know the answer. Before that, you won't lose anything by helping Brother Shao Chun. Moreover, it will make my sister happy. Why not?" Long Yang knew his father's character well, so he didn't expect to change the Dragon Emperor's attitude towards Shao Chun with just a few words. However, as Long Yang said, the Dragon Emperor and the Dragon Tribe wouldn't lose anything by helping Shao Chun. They just had to act according to their abilities. Moreover, by doing so, they could ease the relationship between Long Qing and the Dragon Emperor, making it easier for Long Qing to accept him as her father. It could be said to be the best of both worlds. Therefore, the Dragon Emperor scolded Long Yang after hearing his words. "You're full of ideas. Get lost. I know what to do now." Although he scolded Long Yang knew that his father had accepted his suggestion. Therefore, he left the study with a smile. Shao Chun didn't know that the Dragon Emperor and Long Yang were discussing him. At this moment, he had already arrived at the culvert of 10,000 arts. As an extremely famous cultivation mystic realm in the central world, the entrance to the culvert of 10,000 arts was naturally built in Dragon City and was personally guarded by the master of the Dragon Tribe. With the Dragon Emperor's token and a guide, Shao Chun entered the culvert of 10,000 arts. Although the Dragon Tribe guards were puzzled, they didn't stop him at all. However, after Shao Chun entered the culvert of 10,000 arts, the 2 Dragon Tribe saints who were in charge of guarding the entrance said unhappily, "Why would this human enter the culvert of 10,000 arts? What's the chief thinking? Forget it. How can you and I guess the chief's intentions? Since this person has the chief's token, we just have to act according to his orders and don't cause any trouble." That's true. However, I don't feel comfortable with a human entering the culvert of 10,000 arts. The 2 of them spoke one after another. Clearly, they had some complaints about Shao Chun entering the culvert of 10,000 arts. However, Shao Chun clearly didn't know about this. Even if he did, he wouldn't care. At this moment, Shao Chun had already entered the culvert of 10,000 arts alone. After passing through the entrance, Shao Chun seemed to have entered a cave. The surrounding light was extremely dim and the cave wasn't large. However, as he went deeper and deeper, Shao Chun realized that the power of laws around him was getting denser and denser. Such a dense power of laws was definitely something Shao Chun had never seen before in his life. It was as if he was in an ocean of laws. As long as he closed his eyes slightly, he could feel the dense power of laws rushing towards him. Yin Yangzi was right. The culvert of 10,000 arts wouldn't disappoint him. Cultivating in such an environment and comprehending the power of laws, Shao Chun believed that even a pig would be able to comprehend the power of laws as long as it was given enough time. The power of laws in the culvert of 10,000 arts was simply too dense. It was at least 1,000 times denser than the outside world. There was almost no need for you to do anything intentionally. The power of laws would automatically revolve around you. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1320. Shao Chun was surprised by the dense power of laws in the culvert of 10,000 arts. At the same time, after personally experiencing the power of laws in the culvert of 10,000 arts, Xiao Chun became even more confident in the battle to the death in 3 months. As long as he could make up for the gap between him and Bai Qiran in terms of the power of laws, even if there was still a gap between their martial skills, he could definitely put up a fight against Bai Qiran with the strength of his physical body. It was not that Xiao Chun did not want to cultivate the absolute Yin footwork and the scorching sun sword that Yin Yangzi had given him, but he did not have the time to do so. Superior saint-level martial arts techniques were not something that could be mastered in just a few months. Furthermore, Xiao Chun still needed to comprehend the power of laws during these 3 months. As such, there was no time for him to cultivate these 2 martial arts techniques. As a result, Xiao Chun had already thought it through. He would focus on comprehending the power of laws in the next 3 months. As for the martial skills, it would not be too late to think about them after he dealt with Bai Qiran. Not wanting to waste any time, Xiao Chun immediately walked towards the depths of the culvert of 10,000 arts. After a few hundred meters, Xiao Chun arrived at the end of the culvert of Wangfang. He saw a small round cave with a cushion in the middle. It was an extremely simple setup. At the same time, the power of laws was the densest here. Without thinking too much about it, Xiao Chun immediately sat down. Naturally, Xiao Chun would not wander around aimlessly like before. After Yin Yangzi's teachings, Xiao Chun also knew that the central world had an extremely mature method of cultivating the power of laws. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Chun murmured softly, "I'll first think of a way to fuse the power of laws and speed laws. Then I'll try to comprehend a new law." The fusion of laws was something that no one dared to think about in the North Star world. In fact, no one had even heard of it. However, there was a detailed explanation of the fusion of laws in the central world. According to Yin Yangzi, the power of law was extensive and profound. The central world not only divided the power of law into 3 realms, the worldly realm, the perceptive realm, and the transformative realm, but also divided the power of law into 3 levels according to the strength of the power of law. Among them, Level 1 laws were the weakest, Level 3 laws were the strongest, and Level 2 laws were in the middle. For example, the laws of strength and the laws of speed that Xiao Chun had comprehended were first-grade laws. This was just like a martial skill. The higher the level of the martial skill, the more powerful it would be. It was the same for the power of laws. At the same level, the power of laws of a higher level would be stronger than the power of laws of a lower level. First-grade laws were the weakest, but they were also the most numerous. For example, the well-known laws of fire, water, and wood, as well as the laws of strength and speed that Xiao Chun had comprehended, all belonged to the category of first-grade laws. They could be said to be the most basic power of law in the world. Above first-grade laws were second-grade laws. Second-grade laws were obviously much more complicated than first-grade laws. They were also more difficult to comprehend and improve. Of course, second-grade laws were obviously more powerful as well. Among the second-grade laws, the one that everyone was most familiar with was the law of lightning, which was the power of law that Bai Qiran had comprehended. Other than that, there was also the law of light, the law of illusion, and so on, which also belonged to the category of second-grade laws. As for third-grade laws, they could be said to be the top power of law in the world. Among them, the most representative were naturally the laws of space and the laws of time. After learning all kinds of knowledge about the power of law from Yin Yangzi, the first step that Xiao Chun had to do this time was to fuse the laws of strength and speed, strive to comprehend a second-grade law, and successfully improve this new law to the level of the mastery realm. This cultivation plan was actually told to Xiao Chun by Yin Yangzi, because Xiao Chun's comprehension of the laws of strength and speed had already reached the limit of the worldly realm. With such a foundation, it would be much easier to break through to the mastery realm. However, it was still not enough to break through to the mastery realm with these 2 first-grade laws. After all, the law of lightning that Bai Qiran had comprehended was a second-grade law. Therefore, the method that Yin Yangzi gave Xiao Chun was to use the foundation of the laws of strength and speed to fuse the 2 laws. In this way, there was a great possibility that he would comprehend a second-grade law. Once the fusion was successful, this law would directly reach the limit of the worldly realm. This left Xiao Chun with a lot of time and effort. It was much easier than comprehending a second-grade law from scratch. After successfully comprehending a second-grade law, Xiao Chun improved it to the level of the mastery realm. As long as he mastered a second-grade law that reached the level of the mastery realm, Xiao Chun's comprehension of the power of law would not be inferior to Bai Qiuran's. Xiao Chun kept Yin Yangzi's teachings in mind. Therefore, after closing his eyes, Xiao Chun immediately began to fuse the two first-grade laws of strength and speed. The fusion of laws was neither difficult nor easy. In addition to one's talent, it also depended on one's luck. In various records in the Central World, there were people who found it extremely difficult to fuse the power of law and failed to succeed after countless attempts. However, there are also people who fused the power of law so smoothly that it could be said that they succeeded in one try. Therefore, the success rate of the fusion of laws was related to talent, but it also had a lot to do with luck. Of course, it also depended on whether the two laws that one wanted to fuse conflicted with each other. For example, the elemental laws of fire and water, the elemental laws of yin and elemental laws of yang naturally conflicted with each other. Therefore, it was very difficult to fuse these conflicting elemental laws together. However, it did not mean that it was impossible. For example, the laws of yin and yang were both second-grade laws, and it was extremely difficult to fuse them together. However, once the fusion was successful, it would form the third-grade law of yin and yang, which was extremely powerful. Various factors had to be considered when fusing the power of law, not just oneself. However, based on Xiao Chun's current situation, the laws of strength and speed did not conflict with each other, but they were not compatible either. As such, it was both difficult and easy for Xiao Chun to fuse the laws of force and the laws of speed. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that the laws of force and the laws of speed were both first-level laws. As such, it would be much easier to fuse them. Xiao Chun recalled the method of fusing the power of law that Yin Yangzi had taught him. After meditating for more than 2 hours, Xiao Chun adjusted his condition to the peak and then officially began to fuse the two great laws in his body. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1321. It was the first time that Xiao Chun had tried to fuse two powers of laws together. Naturally, there were many difficulties in the process. At first, it was not surprising that it ended in failure. Xiao Chun had failed several times, but this was all within his expectations. Even though he was extremely confident in his talent, Xiao Chun didn't think that he could successfully fuse two types of laws together just by trying a few times. Naturally, it was difficult to fuse two types of laws together. Fortunately, the laws in the 10,000 Arts Culvert were extremely dense, which helped Xiao Chun a lot. At the same time, as he continued to fail, Xiao Chun continued to accumulate experience. Xiao Chun had already comprehended two types of first-level laws to the limit of the mortal realm. As for the laws of strength and the laws of speed, Xiao Chun wanted to know what kind of laws would be formed after they were fused. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed. During this month, Xiao Chun had been working hard to fuse the laws together, so he was completely unaware of what was happening in the outside world. In truth, while Xiao Chun was cultivating in the 10,000 Arts Culvert, Bai Qiuran, who was far away in the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, finally discovered that Xiao Chun had secretly left the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. When she learned that Xiao Chun had secretly left the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, Bai Qiuran's mood was easy to imagine. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Bai Qiuran had already decided that no matter what method she used, she had to get rid of Xiao Chun as soon as possible. However, Xiao Chun wasn't in the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect at all, and there was no news of him at all. This infuriated Bai Qiuran to the extreme. When she thought of Xiao Chun's terrifying rate of growth, Bai Qiuran began to lose confidence. Who knew what level Xiao Chun would grow to in 3 months? Bai Qiuran sat in the main hall of the cave with a gloomy expression. Ever since she learned that Xiao Chun had secretly left the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, she had become more and more irritable with each passing day. Damn it! Damn it! Why did we let him escape? Perhaps even Bai Qiran herself didn't realize that after learning that Shao Chun had left the Skyene Sun sect, Bai Qiran had been furious at first. However, her anger had quickly turned into fear. That's right, Bai Qiran was afraid. He was afraid that once Shao Chun grew up, even he would not be a match for him. In the past, Bai Qiran definitely wouldn't have such thoughts. She wouldn't even look Shao Chun in the eye. However, things were different now. After half a year in the Heavenly Een Valley, Shao Chen's improvement had made Bai Qiran lose all confidence. She went from ignoring Shao Chun in the beginning to feeling a trace of fear now. Bai Qiran had long sent people out to search for Shao Chen's whereabouts. There was no way she would let Shao Chun cultivate peacefully for 3 months and then return for a death match with her. Unfortunately, Shao Chun was far away in the dragon territory. Even if Bai Qiran turned the entire human territory upside down, she wouldn't be able to find Shao Chun. While Bai Qiran was feeling extremely depressed and fearful at the same time, in Yun Kunyo's cave abode, early in the morning, Yun Kunyo was practicing martial arts in the courtyard. After finishing a set, Yun Kunyo went to the pavilion in the courtyard and sat down in the collateral branch. She poured herself a cup of tea, then turned to Alchemy and asked, "How is it? Bai Qiran still hasn't given up?" Yes. Not only did she send people out to search, but she even asked the Bai family to help. Lian Yao nodded. Bai Qiran's wanton search for Shao Chun naturally couldn't be hidden from Yun Kunyo. Yun Kunyo revealed a disdainful smile when she heard Lian Yao's words. What a useless pile of mud. Instead of wasting so much energy on such useless things, she might as well make the best use of her time to cultivate. Looks like Bai Qiran really isn't worthy of being a holy disciple on the hallowed rankings. As soon as Shao Chun went missing, Bai Qiran seemed to have lost her soul. She only thought about how to find Shao Chun and get rid of him. She hadn't thought about what would happen even if Shao Chun had gone missing. He would come back one day. What Bai Qiran needed to do now was very simple, and that was to constantly improve her strength. To put it bluntly, so long as Bai Qiran's strength could suppress Shao Chun, then no matter what Shao Chun did, it would be useless. Of course, the reverse was also true. Strength was king. No matter what the process was, no matter what schemes were used, strength was what mattered in the end. Unfortunately, Bai Qiran didn't understand that. In other words, Bai Qiran had been frightened by Shao Chun, and her confidence had completely collapsed. She no longer dared to fight Shao Chun head-on. She only dared to use some despicable methods to get rid of Shao Chun. Yun Kunyo smiled disdainfully and stood up. As she walked out of the courtyard, she muttered to herself, "You don't even have the guts. Bai Qiran, what else can you do?" Huh. It was as if she could already see Bai Qiran falling off the pedestal and being killed by Shao Chun. Because of Shao Chun's departure, the situation in the Taiyang sect had changed drastically, especially Bai Qiran's reaction. However, while Bai Qiran was frantically looking for him, Shao Chun had already been cultivating in the culvert of myriad arts for nearly 2 months. After nearly 2 months of cultivation, Shao Chun was finally about to succeed. By now, Shao Chun had already mostly fused the laws of strength and speed. He was only 1 step away from successfully fusing the 2 laws of strength together. The collateral relative sat on the cattail hassock with his eyes closed. If there had been anyone else present at the moment, they would have been able to easily sense that the power of laws around Shao Chun was extremely chaotic. Furthermore, there was no trace of any attribute to it. The once distinct rules of force and speed had been completely scattered by Shao Chun. It was impossible to tell what attribute the power of laws around Shao Chun was of at the moment. Time passed little by little. Another 3 days passed in this manner. On this day, the chaotic laws of strength around Shao Chun suddenly became violent. However, they quickly subsided and entered Shao Chun's body. The chaotic laws of strength disappeared, and a brand new laws of strength emerged in Shao Chun's body. A smile appeared on Shao Chun's face as he carefully sensed the power of laws formed by the fusion of the laws of force and speed. After the fusion of the 2 laws of strength, It had indeed formed a brand new law of strength, and it was extremely powerful. The law of gravity, Xiao Chen murmured softly. That's right. After nearly 2 months of hard work, the laws of strength and speed in Xiao Chen's body had successfully fused into the law of gravity. It was a peak level 2 law of strength, much stronger than by Chiron's law of lightning. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Chapter 1322. The laws of force and the laws of speed had successfully fused into a brand new law of gravity. Compared to the laws of force and the laws of speed, the law of gravity was naturally much more powerful. Xiao Chen could not help but feel excited after simply sensing the power of the law of gravity. As the name suggested, the law of gravity could form a gravity domain around him once he used it. Within this domain, Xiao Chen could increase the gravity on any object as long as he wanted to. To put it simply, when Xiao Chen was fighting with others, he could use the law of gravity to suppress his opponent, as if a mountain was pressing down on his opponent. Thinking about it, if one was fighting with a mountain on their back, no matter how strong one was, their combat power would be reduced. After nearly 2 months of hard work, Xiao Chen finally completed the first step and successfully comprehended the law of gravity. After several attempts, Xiao Chen gradually mastered the application of the law of gravity. After all, the law of gravity was formed by the fusion of the laws of force and the laws of speed. Xiao Chen was not unfamiliar with it at all. He immediately reached the limit of the mortal realm. With Xiao Chen's current understanding of the law of gravity, he could increase the gravity around him to 10,000 times. Of course, this was only for now. If he could break through to the mastery realm, the limit of the law of gravity would definitely be increased. He had only tried to increase the gravity by 10,000 times, but it was already obvious how terrifying it was. After the initial shock and excitement, Xiao Chen quickly adjusted his state of mind again. There was still more than a month before the 3-month deadline. What Xiao Chen had to do next was to improve the law of gravity to the mastery realm. Now that Xiao Chen's understanding of the law of gravity had reached the limit of the mortal realm, he was only 1 step away from the mastery realm. With more than a month's time and the help of the 10,000 arts culvert, his chances of success were still very high. Now was not the time to be happy. So Xiao Chen quickly focused his mind and began to comprehend the newly formed law of gravity. The rich power of laws surrounded Xiao Chen, and he once again sat still as if he had entered a meditative state. While Xiao Chen was doing his best to cultivate, Longqing had been living in Dragon City for more than a month. During this period of time, the Dragon Emperor naturally treated Longqing well. Not only did he try his best to take care of Longqing's life, but he also took out a lot of natural treasures and even a cultivation mystic realm unique to the dragon tribe for free. The Dragon Emperor's care for Longqing could be said to be meticulous. With the Dragon Emperor's help, Longqing's bloodline power had indeed awakened a lot. Just as Long Yang had said, as a member of the Dragon Clan, Longqing had to come to Dragon City if she wanted to become truly powerful. This was because there were many secret cultivation realms in Dragon City that were of great help to the Dragon Clan. Longqing's cultivation did not break through, but her strength had increased a lot. The Dragon Emperor was naturally pleased to see Longqing's improvement. At the same time, with the passage of time, many members of the Dragon Clan in Dragon City had also accepted Longqing's identity. It cannot be helped. Longqing was the Dragon Emperor's biological daughter, so her identity was naturally very noble. In addition, Longqing's appearance easily gained the approval of the younger generation of the Dragon Clan. Moreover, in the past month, many members of the younger generation of the Dragon Clan had started to pursue Longqing, but Longqing had no intention of paying attention to them at all. In just over a month, Longqing had become the recognized #1 beauty of the younger generation of the Dragon Clan, and there were many suitors. The Dragon Emperor was naturally overjoyed that his daughter was so popular. Therefore, he didn't pay any attention to the young men from the Dragon Clan who were pursuing Longqing. After all, this was a matter of the younger generation. He definitely wouldn't casually interfere. Time passed slowly and peacefully. On this day, Long Qing finished cultivating in a secret realm called the Dragon Cave, as usual, and prepared to return to her residence. As she walked, Long Qing thought to herself, "It's been almost 3 months. I wonder how little brother is doing." It had been almost 3 months since Xiao Chun entered the culvert of myriad arts. Long Qing did not know when Xiao Chun would come out of seclusion. If he still did not come out, it was very likely that he would miss the 3-month agreement between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiron. Even so, Long Qing had no intention of urging Xiao Chun. This was because Long Qing knew very well that if Xiao Chun could not gain anything in the culvert of myriad arts, even if he returned to the Taiyang sect, he would not have a good ending. Therefore, it was better to let Xiao Chun stay in the culvert of myriad arts to cultivate. As for the 3-month agreement, Long Qing did not care at all. Just as Long Qing was thinking about Xiao Chun, 2 girls immediately appeared in front of Long Qing. These 2 girls were also pure-blooded members of the Dragon Clan and had a good relationship with Long Qing. Both of them were the daughters of Long Qing's third uncle, Long Fun, and could be considered as Long Qing's cousins. Long Qing frowned slightly when she was blocked by the 2 girls. Then, she said indifferently, "What's the matter?" The 2 girls were called Long Kuei and Long Qi. They were not very familiar with each other. Although they had exchanged a few words with each other before, it was only a nodding acquaintance. Long Kuei did not know what the 2 girls wanted. When she heard Long Qing's words, she said anxiously, "Sister Qing, hurry up and go to the cave. Your friend just came out of seclusion, but he had a conflict with Long Yu." The 2 girls came to Long Qing in a hurry because of the matter between Xiao Chun and Long Yu. Long Kuei and Long Qi were originally cultivating in the culvert of myriad arts. After today's cultivation, they were preparing to go home. However, they did not expect that Xiao Chun would also come out of seclusion today. A human coming out of the culvert of myriad arts naturally piqued the interest of the 2 sisters. However, as luck would have it, Long Yu also came to the culvert of myriad arts to cultivate today and bumped into Xiao Chun. Seeing that a human could enter the culvert of myriad arts, Long Yu immediately roared in anger. He suspected that Xiao Chun had sneaked into the culvert of myriad arts. He wanted to capture Xiao Chun on the spot and send him to the punishment hall for questioning. Speaking of Long Yu, he could be considered a figure in the Dragon Clan. He was the 4th genius of a younger generation of the Dragon Clan and a saint on the saint ranking. Although there were only a few hundred people in the younger generation of the Dragon Clan, there were 4 people on the saint ranking. It was double the number of the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sects. The strongest of them was definitely Long Yang. Although Long Yu was the weakest of the 4, he was still a saint on the saint ranking and was ranked 102nd. Moreover, Long Yu happened to be the youngest son of the 3rd elder in charge of the punishment hall. Therefore, he was a little arrogant. When he saw Xiao Chun, his first reaction was to capture Xiao Chun and send him to the punishment hall, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 13:23. When Long Yu saw Xiao Chun coming out of the 10,000 Laws culvert, he immediately wanted to arrest Xiao Chun and bring him to the punishment hall. At the same time, he insisted that Xiao Chun had snuck into the 10,000 Laws culvert and coveted it. In the face of Long Yu's unreasonable accusations, Xiao Chun naturally could not tolerate it. Therefore, a fight between the 2 was inevitable. After hearing Long Kuei and Long Qi's words, Long Qing did not hesitate and immediately flew in the direction of the 10,000 Laws culvert. "Sister Qing, wait for us." Seeing that Long Qing was rushing towards the 10,000 Laws culvert without saying a word, Long Kuei and Long Qi naturally chased after her. Long Qing was worried that Xiao Chun would be in trouble, but she was obviously one step too late. Just as Long Qing was rushing towards the 10,000 Laws culvert, outside the 10,000 Laws culvert, Xiao Chen's face was gloomy as he spoke. "You said that I snuck in. Then you should recognize this token, right?" Xiao Chen said as he waved the token in his hand. This token was the personal token of the Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor had personally given it to Xiao Chun so that Xiao Chun could move freely in Dragon City. After all, Xiao Chun was from the human clan. Without this token, the many Dragon Clan members in Dragon City would definitely find trouble with Xiao Chun. When they saw the token in Xiao Chen's hand, the Dragon Clan members should have known what was going on. Just like now, the expressions of the more than 10 Dragon Clan members changed. They no longer looked at Xiao Chun with any hostility. Since he was from a human clan recognized by the Dragon Emperor, they naturally would not say anything. However, there was a strange person besides these Dragon Clan members. That was the young man in a black dragon robe who was blocking Xiao Chen's way. He was the fourth genius of the Dragon Clan, Long Yu. This guy was definitely a strange person. After seeing the token of the Dragon Emperor, Long Yu still had no intention of moving aside. After a slight pause, he shouted at the top of his voice, "Human, you are really audacious. Not only did you sneak into the 10,000 Laws Culvert, but you also dared to steal the token of the Dragon Emperor. I think you are really courting death." Steal the token of the Dragon Emperor? Hearing this, the corners of Xiao Chen's mouth twitched unconsciously, then looked at Long Yu as if he was an idiot and said, "Is your brain? Who is the Dragon Emperor? I stole his token? Steal 1-1. Let me see." It was simply nonsense. The Dragon Emperor was a great saint sovereign. Even a great saint sovereign could not steal this personal medallion without the Dragon Emperor noticing, let alone Xiao Chun. Long Yu's words were full of ridicule. Not only Xiao Chun, but the other Dragon Clan members also had strange expressions after hearing Long Yu's words. Long Yu's words were indeed a little retarded. At the same time, with Long Yu's words, the Dragon Clan members present also understood that Long Yu didn't like Xiao Chun and was deliberately looking for trouble. There was no enmity between Long Yu and Xiao Chun. The two didn't know each other at all. The reason why Long Yu acted like this was probably because of his arrogance. Those who were familiar with Long Yu knew that Long Yu cared very much about his identity as a member of the Dragon Clan. At the same time, he looked down on outsiders, especially the human clan. It was said that this was related to Long Yu's experience in his youth. It was said that when Long Yu was young, he went out to fight and was once beaten up by the #1 genius of the Xinyuan clan, Xinyuan Baijian. In the end, Xinyuan Baijian spared Long Yu's life because of his identity as a member of the Dragon Clan. But even so, Long Yu was still severely humiliated at that time. Since then, Long Yu seemed to have a special hatred for the human clan. Thinking about it, it was normal. After all, Long Yu's character was arrogant. Usually, he couldn't even suffer a little, let alone be humiliated. He deeply hated the human clan in his heart. So when he saw Xiao Chun today, Long Yu showed such strong hatred. Obviously, Long Yu's hatred for Xinyuan Baijian had expanded to the entire human clan. However, Xiao Chun obviously didn't know about this. After he finished speaking, Xiao Chun didn't want to say anything more. He knew that Long Yu was here to cause trouble, so it was useless to say anything more. So, Xiao Chun directly put away the token in his hand, looked at Long Yu, and said indifferently, "Move." If Long Yu still refused to listen, Xiao Chun would have no choice but to make a move. Since he couldn't reason with him, he naturally had to rely on his fists. After 3 months of cultivation, Xiao Chun's strength was definitely enough to be ranked on the saint rankings. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't care about facing Long Yu. Besides, Xiao Chun also learned about Long Yu's identity from the surrounding Dragon Clan. He was the 4th genius of the Dragon Clan and ranked 102nd on the saint rankings. Xiao Chun didn't care about Long Yu's ranking on the saint rankings at all. It was lower than by Chiron and didn't pose any threat at all. In 3 months, Xiao Chun's law of gravity didn't disappoint and broke through to the mastery state. At the same time, he also accidentally comprehended the laws of fire and the laws of earth. It could be said that in just 3 months, Xiao Chun's strength had undergone an earth-shattering change. Therefore, Xiao Chun wasn't afraid of Long Yu at all. He was confident that he could take Long Yu down, but Long Yu obviously didn't know his own limits. When he heard Xiao Chun's indifferent words, a hint of hatred flashed in Long Yu's eyes. "Since you don't want to take the initiative to go to the punishment hall, it seems that I have no choice but to take you there by force." Having said that, Long Yu immediately threw a punch. In the face of Long Yu's punch, Xiao Chun didn't dodge. Instead, he threw a punch of his own. When the two fists collided, there was a loud bang, and Long Yu was directly sent flying. It was obvious who had the upper hand with one punch. After being punched by Xiao Chun in front of so many people, Long Yu's expression became extremely gloomy. He glared at Xiao Chun and shouted angrily, "You're courting death." Having said that, an earth-shattering dragon roar resounded. Then, Long Yu directly transformed into his original form. A huge green dragon appeared in front of Xiao Chun. After transforming into his original form, Long Yu's aura became even more terrifying. The rich dragon clan's coercion continued to overflow. Unfortunately, even in the face of Long Yu, who had transformed into his original form, Xiao Chun didn't change his expression at all. He just said indifferently, "I'm afraid you're the one who's courting death." Having said that, before Long Yu could make a move, a terrifying law power suddenly descended from the sky from Xiao Chun's body. For a moment, everyone around, including Long Yu, felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on them. Their legs bent involuntarily, and under the effect of this gravitational force, cracks began to appear on the ground as if it was being crushed. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1324. With Xiao Chun as the center, everyone around him felt as if they were carrying a huge mountain on their backs. The dragons with lower cultivation were still fine, as they could still grit their teeth and persevere, but the dragons with lower cultivation were in a miserable state. They were instantly pressed to the ground, unable to move. This scene was naturally caused by Xiao Chun's law of gravity. As the main target of the law of gravity, Long Yu was undoubtedly under the greatest pressure of all. However, as a chosen on the saint ranking, Long Yu was not directly crushed by Xiao Chun's law of gravity, but his combat strength was indeed weakened by a lot. He looked at Xiao Chun with a solemn expression. At this moment, Long Yu finally realized how terrifying Xiao Chun was, but it was all too late. At this moment, Xiao Chun did not give Long Yu any chance to recover. He leaped up and instantly rode on Long Yu's back. He raised his fist and smashed it hard on Long Yu's head. Relying on his powerful physical strength, Long Yu felt a wave of dizziness. However, this was just the beginning. Then, the dragon's presence saw Xiao Chun riding on Long Yu's back, who had reverted to his true form. Long Yu screamed miserably as his fists kept falling. This was completely a one-sided beating. Under the suppression of the law of gravity, Long Yu could not exert much of his strength at all. Moreover, Xiao Chun did not give him any chance to breathe. His fists kept falling like raindrops. Long Yu's huge body kept struggling in the air, but no matter how hard he tried, Xiao Chun was still riding on him. As a chosen on the saint ranking, Long Yu was beaten up mercilessly. In the end, Long Yu's huge body flew from the sky and landed on the ground. Xiao Chun was still riding on Long Yu's back. Don't hit me," Xiao Chun said in a muffled voice, but when he heard Long Yu's words, he sneered. "Didn't you want to make a move? I told you, you're the one courting death." After saying that, Xiao Chun threw another punch at Long Yu. This guy was asking for a beating. Just as Long Yu was about to be beaten to death by Xiao Chun, Long Qing, Long Kuei, and Long Qi arrived. When the three girls saw Xiao Chun straddling Long Yu's body and beating him up mercilessly, Long Kuei and Long Qi were stunned. It couldn't be helped. The two of them had never imagined that Long Yu would be the one to be beaten up in the end. After all, Long Yu was the fourth genius of the Dragon Clan. Moreover, no matter what, he was still in existence on the Saint rankings. But now, Long Yu was like a dead dog, and Xiao Chun was riding him and beating him up without a care. The result was far beyond the two girls' expectations. As for Long Qing, she was very calm at the moment. It wasn't that Long Qing looked down on Long Yu, but Long Qing knew how strong Xiao Chun was. If it had been anyone else today, they would have been beaten up by Long Yu. But since it was Xiao Chun, Long Yu could only blame himself for courting death. It wasn't that Long Yu was too weak, nor that the Saint rankings were too weak. It was that Xiao Chun was too strong. 3 months ago, Xiao Chun was already able to contend with Bai Chiron. Although he was at a disadvantage, he still had the strength to fight. 3 months later, Xiao Qin's strength had advanced by leaps and bounds. It was only natural that he would beat up Long Yu. Long Qing wasn't too surprised. Seeing that Long Yu was on the verge of death and looked seriously injured, Long Qing shouted, "Little brother, stop." She didn't let Xiao Chun continue. After all, this was the Dragon Clan. No matter how strong Long Yu was, if Xiao Chun directly killed or crippled him, it would indeed be difficult to settle the matter. It was fine to beat up Long Yu. For the sake of the Dragon Emperor, the third elder definitely wouldn't say anything. However, if Xiao Chun directly crippled or killed Long Yu, it would be difficult to settle the matter. Just as he was having fun beating up Long Yu, Xiao Chun suddenly stopped what he was doing when he heard Long Qing's words. They didn't have much enmity to begin with, and after beating up Long Yu, Xiao Qin's anger had already dissipated. Xiao Chun withdrew the law of gravity, then jumped down from Long Yu and came to Long Qing. He smiled and said, "Second sister, why are you here?" Seeing Xiao Qin's completely indifferent look, Long Qing rolled her eyes and said, "If I didn't come, were you going to beat him to death?" Xiao Chun beat Long Yu to such a state, but he didn't seem to care at all. Long Qing didn't know what to say about this. Her little brother was indeed a little too careless. However, compared to Long Qing, Long Kuei and Long Qi's eyes were filled with stars. They looked at Xiao Chun with eyes full of admiration. Obviously, the two girls didn't expect Xiao Chun to be so strong that he could beat Long Yu to such a state. For a moment, the two girls were also very curious about this human. They didn't care about the changes in the expressions of the two girls. Just as Xiao Chun and Long Qing were talking, the people from the disciplinary hall had arrived, and they were led by the third elder himself. Seeing the third elder striding over, Long Qing's eyes flashed with a hint of worry. She knew that Long Yu was the son of the third elder. Now that her son was beaten to such a state, how could Long Qing not be worried when the father came? She had intended to go up and greet the third elder, but who knew that the third elder would ignore everyone else and go straight to Long Yu? At this time, Long Yu had already returned to his human form. He was lying on the ground in a miserable state, and his eyes seemed to be filled with tears. The third elder came to Long Yu with a dark face and shouted coldly, "Unfilial son, what happened?" Unlike the other fathers, the third elder didn't criticize him immediately. Instead, the third elder first asked about the whole story and found out what happened. Looking at the third elder's way of handling the matter, Xiao Qin's eyes flashed with a smile. Towards this old man, Xiao Chun didn't have a good impression of him. After all, when they first met, the third elder had wanted to punish Long Qing righteously. But now, it seemed that this old man wasn't what he had imagined. Not only did he ask his son, he also asked the other members of the Dragon Clan present. Finally, the third elder understood the whole story. At this time, the third elder stepped in front of Xiao Chun and first clasped his hands in greeting to Long Qing. "Greetings, princess. You're too polite, third elder." Facing the third elder's greeting, Long Qing also returned the greeting. After greeting Long Qing, the third elder looked at Xiao Chun. He still had that dead fish face and said expressionlessly, "My unfilial son has offended you, young master. I already know about this matter. Don't worry, young master, this old man will not be biased in this matter. However, this old man will still apologize to you on behalf of my unfilial son. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1325. Although he said he was apologizing, Xiao Chun did not see the slightest bit of remorse on the third elder's deadpan face. He was still as cold and stern as ever. It was as if the third elder never smiled. No matter when or what occasion it was, the third elder always had the same expression. However, Xiao Chun did not care about this. He smiled and said politely to the third elder, "Senior, you're exaggerating." Xiao Chun's opinion of the third elder had indeed changed a lot. Today, he had beaten up his son, but the third elder did not have the slightest intention of denouncing him. On the contrary, after figuring out the whole story, he took the initiative to apologize to him. To be able to do this Xiao Chun believed that although the third elder seemed stubborn, he was a very principled person. Everything he did was based on the Dragon Clan's punishment. It was indeed a blessing for the Dragon Clan to have such a person in charge of the punishment hall of the Dragon Clan. The third elder didn't say much. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, he nodded slightly and then ordered his men to carry the seriously injured Long Yu and leave. After the third elder and the punishment hall left, the matter came to an end. Then Long Qing, Long Kuei, the 3 Long Qi girls, and Xiao Chun left the 10,000 Arts Culvert. However, although the matter seemed to have been resolved, the news of Xiao Chun beating up Long Yu soon spread in Dragon City. When they heard that Long Yu was beaten up by a human and was almost powerless to fight back, many of the younger generation of the Dragon Clan were shocked. The outside world was abuzz with rumors about Xiao Chun. In the courtyard where Long Qing lived, Xiao Chun and Long Qing sat opposite each other on a stone bench in the courtyard. Looking at Xiao Chun, Long Qing took the initiative to ask, "Little brother, what do you plan to return to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect?" There were less than 5 days left until the 3-month agreement. Moreover, based on the events of today, Xiao Chen's strength had clearly improved greatly. So, the battle with Bai Qiran was inevitable. Upon hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chun replied without hesitation, "Tomorrow." With that, Xiao Chun turned to look at Long Qing. After a pause, he asked, "What about you, second sister? Do you want to go back with me, or stay in the Dragon Clan?" Long Qing had already returned to the Dragon Clan, and she was trying to accept the Dragon Emperor as her father. Therefore, she had to return to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Xiao Chun didn't know what Long Qing would choose, so he asked. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing scolded him with a smile. "Me? Other than going back with you, what else can I do?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen was stunned for a moment before asking, then will uncle allow you to leave?" "Who cares? In any case, I prefer to stay with little brother. Besides, there's no point in staying in the Dragon Clan." She had no intention of staying in the Dragon Clan at all. In Long Qing's opinion, being by Xiao Chen's side was the most comfortable. Perhaps this was a habit she had developed over the years. After hearing that Long Qing wanted to return to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect with him, Xiao Chen naturally didn't say anything since Long Qing had already made up her mind. While the siblings were talking, Long Yang was also in the Dragon Emperor's study. The father and son sat across from each other. Long Yang looked at his father and said with a cheeky smile, "How is it, father? I was right? Brother Xiao Chun will be able to enter the holy rankings soon, right?" It was obvious that Long Yang already knew about what happened today. Upon hearing Long Yang's words, the Dragon Emperor replied indifferently, "Yes, there were some surprises, but this time, Xiao Chun is going to have a life-and-death battle with Bai Qiran. Bai Qiran is stronger than that brat Long Yu." With the Dragon Emperor's status, he naturally knew about the matter between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran. After all, the Dragon Clan's information channels weren't just for show. After defeating Long Yu, Xiao Chun was indeed qualified to enter the holy rankings, but this didn't mean that Xiao Chun could defeat Bai Qiran. After all, Bai Qiran was clearly stronger than Long Yu. Upon hearing the Dragon Emperor's words, Long Yang said without any worry, "Father, just wait and see. Perhaps there won't be anyone called Bai Qiran in this world soon." Compared to the Dragon Emperor's attitude towards Xiao Chun, Long Yang was extremely confident in Xiao Chun. As soon as Long Yang finished speaking, a huge golden light screen suddenly appeared in the sky. This light screen directly illuminated the originally dark sky. The huge light screen stretched across the sky, and anyone in any corner would be able to see the contents of the light screen. As the light screen appeared, the Dragon Emperor was expressionless while Long Yang revealed a faint smile. This light screen was none other than the holy rankings of the Central World. Every time there was a change on the holy rankings, the light screen would immediately appear to inform everyone in the Central World of the latest situation. One could clearly see that there were a total of 108 names on the light screen, and Long Yang's name was ranked 3rd. However, the most eye-catching thing was obviously not Long Yang and the other 3 people in front of him, but the 102nd position. Originally, There were two large words written there, but very quickly, the two words slowly disappeared and moved to the 103rd position. Naturally, the names below the 108th position also moved down by one place. In the end, the name that was originally ranked 108th disappeared from the holy rankings. Long Yu's name dropped from the 102nd place to the 103rd place, and three golden words slowly appeared in the 102nd place. Xiao Chun, human. The appearance of these three large words meant that the will of the heavenly way of the central world had acknowledged Xiao Qin's identity as the chosen on the holy rankings. As for the person behind the name, it represented Xiao Qin's race, the human race. A newcomer on the holy rankings was definitely a big deal for the central world. For a moment, everyone in the central world began to discuss Xiao Qin's name. Who was this person? What was his identity? How high was his talent? It had to be said that the moment Xiao Qin's name appeared on the holy rankings, his name also spread throughout the central world at the fastest speed. People from all the major races were inquiring about Xiao Qin. As for Xiao Qin, who was in Dragon City, at this moment, he was also looking at the light screen in the sky, just like Long Qing. When he saw his name appear in the 102nd position, a faint smile appeared on Xiao Qin's face. He had finally made it onto the holy rankings. Now, he could be considered to have gained a foothold in the central world. After all, with the protection of the will of the heavenly way, the experts of the older generation could no longer attack him. He was a little excited. After all, the holy rankings were established by the will of the heavenly way, and its value was much higher than that of the Northern Star Boundary's holy sons and holy daughters. Furthermore, being able to make it onto the holy rankings meant that Xiao Qin had successfully stood on the highest stage of the younger generation in the central world. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1326. I finally made it onto the holy rankings. However, on second thought, Xiao Qin felt that the will of the heavenly way was really everywhere. Speaking of which, the battle between him and Long Yu today was not a so-called fair battle at all. If it was in the North Star Boundary, it would definitely be meaningless, and it would be impossible to determine the position of the Holy Sun based on this. However, the holy rankings were different. The holy rankings were created by the will of the heavenly way, and the will of the heavenly way knew every move in the entire central world like the back of his hand. Therefore, the battle between him and Long Yu today was obviously known by the will of the heavenly way. With the outcome of this battle, Xiao Qin had also successfully made it onto the holy rankings. From this, it could be seen that the rankings on the holy rankings did not require any formal battle at all. As long as you fought with someone of the same generation in a one-on-one situation, regardless of whether it was an encounter in the wild, a battle in the city, or a formal battle in the arena, as long as the outcome was determined, your ranking on the holy rankings would definitely change. Of course, if you challenged someone who was ranked higher than you and lost, you would naturally not be affected. On the contrary, if you won, you would naturally take over his position. As for the loser, they would move down one place until they finally dropped out of the holy rankings. Just like now, because Xiao Qin had made it onto the holy rankings, Long Yu had moved to the 103rd place, and the original 107th place had become the last place. As for the previous last place person, he had already been removed from the holy rankings. From now on, he would no longer be protected by the will of the heavenly way. The will of the heavenly way's rules on the holy rankings were set up very simply and effectively. Of course, this was something only the will of the heavenly way could do. After all, it was naturally impossible for a cultivator to know what was happening in the entire central world. Therefore, it was impossible for the will of the heavenly way to change the rankings of the holy rankings at any time and place based on the strength of everyone. It could be said that the will of the heavenly way had abandoned all complicated things and only used the simplest and most effective method to determine the rankings of the 108 holy sons on the holy rankings. The goal was also very obvious. It was to ensure the authenticity of the holy rankings and ensure that all the holy sons on the holy rankings were the strongest among the younger generation in the Central World. There was no way to take advantage of the situation. In Dragon City, Xiao Chun smiled faintly. The fact that he had made it onto the saint ranking naturally made some people happy, while others were sad. The Taiyang sect, Yinyangzi, the people of the Sacred Palace, including the many disciples of the Sacred Palace, Bai Riyue, Xiao Qing, and the people around Xiao Chun were naturally overjoyed by this result. On the other hand, there were some other people, such as Bai Qiran. Inside Bai Qiran's cave dwelling, he also saw the light screen in the sky through the barrier of the cave dwelling. He also saw Xiao Qin's name appear on the holy rankings. In an instant, Bai Qiran's face turned completely red. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. I should have thought of this long ago. Why can't I give this little bastard even the slightest chance? It has only been a short 3 months, yet he is already on the saint ranking. Damn it! Bai Qiran was incomparably furious in her heart. She was practically gritting her teeth as she spat out every word. During these 3 months, Bai Qiran had never given up on searching for Xiao Chen's whereabouts. Unfortunately, there was still no news. However, judging from the situation on the holy rankings, Bai Qiran guessed where Xiao Chun had gone. The Beast Race territory. Xiao Chun had defeated Long Yu and replaced him. Therefore, Xiao Chun had to be in the Beast Race territory because Long Yu couldn't possibly have come to the human race territory. He was filled with regret. He hated himself for not killing Xiao Chun as soon as possible. It could be said that he had taken one wrong step after another. In the end, Bai Qiran was powerless to do anything. He could only watch as Xiao Chun rose step by step, gradually bringing him great pressure. The light screen remained for 2 hours before slowly disappearing. 2 hours was enough for everyone in the Central World to firmly remember the latest changes on the holy rankings. Bai Qiran's eyes flashed with determination when the holy rankings disappeared. He immediately took out a voice transmission talisman from his storage ring. No one knew who the talisman was for, or what Bai Qiran said to the talisman. When the talisman slowly disappeared, Bai Qiran said viciously, "Xiao Chun, you forced me to do this." No one knew that Bai Qiran had used the talisman to contact Xiao Chun. However, it was destined to be an eventful night. Xiao Chen's name became like a spark overnight, quickly spreading across the territories of various races in the Central World. After a night of silence, Xiao Chun, as the person involved, left the courtyard early the next day to cultivate his martial skills. His power of laws had already made great progress. Next, Xiao Chun would focus on his martial skills. Although the absolute Yin footwork technique and the blazing sword technique couldn't be cultivated overnight, his hard work would eventually pay off. After cultivating for more than 2 hours, Xiao Chun and Long Qing came to the front hall together. The two of them saw the Dragon Emperor, Long Yang, Feng Zhu, Long Kui, Long Qi, and Long Fun. The Dragon Emperor sat in the main seat, while Long Fun sat to the left of the Dragon Emperor. As for Long Yang and the others, they were standing. As Xiao Chun and Long Qing arrived, Long Yang was the first to smile and say to Xiao Chun, "Haha, congratulations, brother Xiao Chun. You entered the saint rankings last night. Today, news of brother Xiao Chun's death has probably spread throughout the Central World." Xiao Chun smiled in response to Long Yang's teasing and didn't say much. At the same time, Long Qing also expressed to the Dragon Emperor that she and Xiao Chun wanted to return to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Surprisingly, the Dragon Emperor didn't stop Long Qing from returning to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. However, the Dragon Emperor's next words stunned Xiao Chun and Long Qing. The Dragon Emperor said indifferently, "Qing, I've been thinking about it for a while. Previously, Yin Yangzi had expressed his intention to form an alliance with the Dragon Clan. However, I didn't agree at that time. But now, since Qing has a close relationship with the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, and I have some friendship with that old fellow Yin Yangzi, it's not impossible for us to form an alliance. So this time, when you go back, let Long Yang, Feng Zhu, Long Kui, and Long Qi go with you. On one hand, you could discuss the alliance with the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. On the other hand, you can let Long Kuei and Long Qi experience more. The Dragon Emperor was going to form an alliance with the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Hearing this, Xiao Chun and Long Qing were clearly stunned. The news was too sudden, and the two of them were completely unprepared. As for traveling with Long Yang and the others, Xiao Chun didn't care anymore. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 13:27. The Dragon Emperor actually wanted to form an alliance with the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. This was definitely something that Xiao Chun did not expect. After all, the Dragon Emperor did not show any intention of forming an alliance before this. However, all in all, this was a good thing. One should know that the Dragon Clan was definitely stronger than the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. If they could form an alliance with the Dragon Clan, it would only be beneficial for the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Although he was a little shocked, to put it bluntly, this matter was not something that Xiao Chun could decide. This was something that only big shots like the Dragon Emperor and Yin Yangzi could decide. It did not have much to do with Xiao Chun. Of course, Xiao Chun did not know that the two most important reasons why the Dragon Emperor chose to form an alliance with the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect were Xiao Chun and Long Qing. Long Qing was needless to say. With the Dragon Emperor's love for her, as long as it was something that could be done, the Dragon Emperor would not refuse. As for Xiao Chun, with his talent, the Dragon Emperor also intended to befriend Xiao Chun. In other words, the Dragon Emperor intended to let the younger generation of the Dragon Clan befriend Xiao Chun. Of course, this was also Long Yang's idea. The Dragon Emperor did not have any intention of discussing this matter. He just told everyone in advance. After a few words, everyone was ready to set off. There were only 4 people when they came, but when they returned, there were a total of 7 people. In addition to Xiao Chun, Long Yang, Feng Zhu, and Long Qing, there were also the 2 sisters, Long Kuei, Long Qi, and Long Fun, a super expert of the half-step Great Saint realm. The 7 of them were ready to set off. They directly left the Dragon Valley through the teleportation array in the Dragon City. They were not in a hurry. After all, there were still a few days before the march promise. Along the way, Long Yang, Long Fun, and Xiao Chun were casually chatting. As for Long Qing and the other 3 women, they were chatting about some topics between women. It was not known whether it was because of Long Kuei, Long Qi, and Feng Zhu had never traveled far before, but the moment they left the Dragon Valley, the 2 sisters could not stop chattering excitedly. Especially when they did not reach a city, the 2 sisters would drag Long Qing and Feng Zhu along for a stroll, leaving Xiao Chun and the others with no choice but to go to a restaurant to drink and wait for them. 3 days passed in a row, and Xiao Chun and his companions returned to the Delight City. As soon as they stepped into the Delight City, the 2 sisters, Long Kuei and Long Qi, dragged along Long Qing and Feng Zhu to go sightseeing, while Xiao Chun and his companions went to find a restaurant to drink and chat. As they drank, Long Fen suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Oh, that's right. The 3rd elder asked me to pass a message to young Master Xiao. Long Yu has already been punished by the punishment hall. It can be considered as an explanation to young Master Xiao." The 3rd elder had specially asked Long Fen to pass this message to Xiao Chun. Hearing this, Xiao Chun was stunned for a moment before he smiled and nodded his head. It seemed that the 3rd elder of the Dragon Clan was really an extremely stubborn old fellow. To be honest, Xiao Chun had never thought of letting the 3rd elder punish Long Yu. After all, even though Long Yu was the one who started the fight, Xiao Chun did not suffer any losses. However, the 3rd elder had still punished Long Yu in the end. From this, one could see his attitude towards the punishment of the Dragon Clan. Even his own son was not exempt. He was indeed an interesting old man. After staying in Joy City for a day, early the next morning, Xiao Chun and the others prepared to leave for the human clan's territory. The Dragon Emperor had clearly already discussed this with Yin Yangzi. Therefore, when they passed through the border between the 2 clans, the human clan did not make things difficult for them. On the contrary, they were very enthusiastic. Of course, The crossing that Long Fun and the others took was controlled by the heavenly Een solar sect. Yin Yangzi had already ordered that the guests of a dragon clan were not to make things difficult for them. In just a few days, it would be Shao Chun and Bai Qiron's 3-month deadline. In other words, it would be 2 days after Shao Chun and the others entered the human clan's territory. Early in the morning, the sky had just lit up when the entire heavenly Een solar sect began to bustle with noise and excitement. Many disciples had arrived at the heavenly Een solar sect's martial arts practice field early in the morning. They gathered under the largest arena in the center. There were tens of thousands of people. Moreover, as time passed, even more disciples were rushing over. Today was the day of the decisive battle between Shao Chun and Bai Qiron. It was a battle to the death between the two. The disciples of the various sects had all arrived. Originally, they did not pay much attention to this battle. However, just a few days ago, Shao Chun had defeated Long Yu and successfully entered the Saint rankings. As a result, this battle naturally became the focus of everyone's attention. This was because Shao Chun was now also on the Saint rankings. This was a battle between the Saints on the Saint rankings. How could people not pay attention to it? At the same time, after Shao Chun entered the Saint rankings, many disciples began to have different opinions about the outcome of this battle. Originally, everyone thought that Shao Chun would definitely lose this battle. However, it was different now. Since Shao Chun had defeated Long Yu, it proved that Shao Chun's strength was definitely not simple. Although Long Yu was definitely weaker than Bai Qiron, who knew if Shao Chun had used his full strength or held back when he defeated Long Yu? More and more people gathered around the martial arts arena. Very quickly, the number reached several 100,000. The martial arts arena was naturally unable to accommodate so many people. Therefore, many people could only stand outside the martial arts arena. They were either standing on tree branches or in the air. They looked at the martial arts arena from afar and quietly waited for the battle to begin. Below the arena, there were special seats for the Sacred Palace disciples. After all, Shao Chun was a member of the Sacred Palace, so it was not difficult to understand why the Sacred Palace disciples would have special seats. At this moment, Qin Shi's group of 4, Chun Ling, Chun Yu, and the others had all arrived. They sat below the arena and waited for the battle to begin. Time slowly trickled by. The battle was scheduled to begin at noon, which meant that there was only a quarter of an hour left before the start of the battle. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the crowd. As far as the eye could see, the crowd parted to the sides, and soon, a path was formed. Along the path, Bai Qiron led a group of disciples from the main branch toward the arena. Not long after, she stepped onto the arena. Today, Bai Qiron wore a long black robe. Her face was incomparably cold, and her eyes flashed with killing intent. Standing proudly on the arena with her hands behind her back, Bai Qiron immediately looked at the Sacred Palace disciples below and said expressionlessly, "What? Shao Chun hasn't returned yet. If he's afraid, he can just say so. I can spare his life for the sake of my fellow disciples," said Bai Qiron coldly. Bai Qiron said coldly. However, Gu Lingyao immediately said with disdain, "Humph, nothing good comes out of a filthy mouth. Do you think our husband is afraid of you? I think you should be the one kneeling and begging for mercy. Please add me to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommend me." Chapter 1328. Gu Lingyao and the other girls naturally did not treat Bai Qiron nicely. Even Chun Ling, Chun Yu, and the others wore icy expressions as they stared coldly at Bai Qiron. Bai Qiron coldly swept her gaze across the Sacred Palace crowd after being mercilessly rebutted by Gu Lingyao. She then revealed a look of disdain. "Since that's the case, where's Shao Chun? Why hasn't he shown himself yet? Are you in a hurry to die? It's not time yet. My husband will naturally show himself when the time is up," Gu Lingyao retorted without giving Bai Qiron any face. It was indeed 15 minutes before the agreed time. Bai Qiron could not be bothered to lower herself to Gu Lingyao's level. With a cold snort, she closed her eyes and quietly waited on the stage. 15 minutes was actually a very short period of time that would pass in the blink of an eye. Soon, the agreed time arrived. Bai Qiran, who had been resting with her eyes closed, slowly opened them as a look of disdain flashed across her eyes. Huh, looks like he's really afraid. The agreed time had arrived, but Xiao Chun still had not shown himself. The surrounding disciples began to whisper to each other when they heard Bai Qiran's words. Many of them revealed looks of disdain and ridicule. To think that I came so early. Looks like Xiao Chun really doesn't dare to show up. That's right. How can someone like him be ranked as a chosen on the saint rankings? What a joke. Forget it. We should have thought of this a long time ago. How could Xiao Chun dare to fight senior brother Bai? Everything before was probably just an act. Many people did their best to slander Xiao Chun. Of course, most of these people were disciples on Bai Qiran's side, so they naturally had to speak up for Bai Qiran to bolster her momentum. The crowd whispered to each other. Gu Lingyao and the other girls gnashed their teeth in anger when they heard these people slander. However, they were also anxious because they still had no news of Xiao Chun. The four girls did not know what was going on with Xiao Chun or why he still had not shown up. They were secretly anxious. Bai Qiran sneered on the stage. Forget it. Since Xiao Chun doesn't dare to fight, then forget it. There will be plenty of chances in the future anyway. Bai Qiran seemed to be certain that Xiao Chun would not show up. However, as soon as her words left her mouth, several voices sounded on the stage. Xiao Chun, Long Qing, Long Yang, Long Kui, Long Qi, and Long Fen appeared out of nowhere. Long. It could be said that they had arrived at the last moment. The reason for this was entirely because it was the first time the two sisters, Long Kui and Long Qi, had entered the territory of another clan. As a result, the two sisters were extremely curious about everything in the human territory. As a result, they were naturally delayed for some time on the way. In the end, it was Long Fen who led the group and arrived in time. Xiao Chun appeared. He looked at Bai Qiran and sneered. Bai Qiran, are you in such a hurry to die? Xiao Chun, Bai Qiran said through gritted teeth. Her eyes blazed with hatred when she heard Xiao Chun's words. Facing Xiao Chun again, for some reason, Bai Qiran felt a trace of fear in her heart. On the other hand, Xiao Chun appeared to be very relaxed. It was as if taking Bai Qiran's head was just a piece of cake. The two looked at each other, terrifying killing intent bursting from their eyes. It was at this moment that an old man appeared on the stage. He was an elder of the heavenly Yin solar sect. He had not appeared for Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran, but for Long Fen. The old man looked directly at Long Fen and smiled. Brother Long Fen, we meet again. Huh? How have you been, Brother Lin? Long Fen laughed heartily. Elder Lin already knew that Long Fen was coming, so he had received Yin Yangzi's order to specially welcome Long Fen here. The two exchanged a few simple pleasantries. Elder Lin then led Long Fen and the others down the stage and sat on the high platform at the center of the stage. As for Long Qing, she returned to the sacred palace camp. Elder Lin and Long Fen were seated on the high platform. Long Yang, Feng Zhu, and Yun Kunyo, the younger generation of disciples, were seated behind them. Sitting beside Long Yang, Yun Kunyo smiled faintly. You've been coming to my heavenly Yin solar sect quite frequently recently. She did not expect Long Yang to come to the heavenly Yin solar sect with Xiao Chun again. Long Yang smiled faintly when he heard Yun Kunyo's words, but did not say anything. After everyone left, only Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran remained on the stage. This was a battle of life and death, so there were naturally no rules. Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran would not rest until one of them was dead. Standing opposite each other, both of them looked at each other with murderous intent. Xiao Chun was the first to speak. Come on, it seems like you can't wait to die. You're the one who's going to die. Bai Qiran snorted coldly when she heard this. The storage ring on her hand flashed, and the dagger appeared in her hand. Her aura soared into the sky. At the same time, the law of lightning that had reached the mastery realm suddenly erupted. Bai Qiran took the initiative to attack. In response, Xiao Chun also activated his will, and the dustless sword instantly appeared in his hand. Holding the dustless sword, Xiao Chun's eyes were overflowing with fighting spirit. At the same time, his aura also soared into the sky. After 3 months, Xiao Chun was no longer afraid of Bai Qiran. Without any nonsense, he faced Bai Qiran head-on. Xiao Chun directly faced her with his sword, and the two of them immediately engaged in a fierce battle. In the arena, the two figures intertwined, and the sound of sword and saber colliding constantly rang out. At the same time, the power of lightning was even more rampant. As the battle of life and death began, a protective array formation immediately rose on the arena. Under the protection of this array formation, the battle between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran would not affect the surrounding disciples. Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran could be said to be mortal enemies. Therefore, once they attacked, neither of them showed any mercy. Their attacks were extremely terrifying. With the power of the law of lightning, Bai Qiran's attacks seemed to be even more powerful. Xiao Chun seemed to be at a complete disadvantage again, just like the last time. Sensing that she was suppressing Xiao Chun, Bai Qiran snorted coldly. Xiao Chun, is this all you've got in 3 months? Where's the law of force and the law of speed? Why don't you use them? In the face of Bai Qiran's provocation, Xiao Chun sneered and said, in that case, as you wish. At first, Xiao Chun only wanted to feel Bai Qiran's law of lightning, so he did not use the law of gravity immediately. After some simple trials, Xiao Chun discovered that after he comprehended the law of gravity and raised it to the mastery realm, he was no longer afraid of Bai Qiran's law of lightning. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1329. Xiao Chun's comprehension of the law of gravity, which had reached the level of the finer realm, meant that there was not much of a gap between him and Bai Qiran in terms of the power of laws. It could almost be said that the two of them were evenly matched in terms of the power of laws. It was no longer like the last time when she could suppress Xiao Chun with the law of thunder. As soon as Xiao Chun finished his sentence, everyone saw a nomological power that wasn't any weaker than Bai Qiran surging from Xiao Chun's body. The nomological power wasn't any weaker than Bai Qiran's law of thunder. At the same time, along with the emergence of the nomological power, the entire arena was quickly enveloped. Bai Qiran, who was in the arena, instantly felt as though there was a huge mountain pressing down on her. The law of gravity. Bai Qiran immediately knew that it was the law of gravity. She stared at Xiao Chun and said coldly, you fused the law of strength and the law of speed? When she fought with Xiao Chun previously, Bai Qiran knew that Xiao Chun comprehended the law of strength and the law of speed and reached the limit of the mortal realm. And now, after just 3 months, Xiao Chun actually comprehended the law of gravity and broke through to the mastery realm. In this case, it could only be that Xiao Chun had fused the law of strength and the law of speed. Fusing 2 first-level laws to form a new second-level law, the law of gravity. Bai Qiran had to admit that Xiao Chun's move surprised her once again. She had underestimated Xiao Chun. Initially, Bai Qiran thought that Xiao Chun would at most break through to the mastery realm in the law of strength and the law of speed in 3 months. But she didn't expect Xiao Chun to forcefully fuse the 2 nomological powers and successfully break through to the mastery realm. If Xiao Chun only broke through to the mastery realm in the law of strength and the law of speed, Bai Qiran would still have the advantage in terms of nomological power. After all, it was common knowledge that 2 first-level laws in the mastery realm were definitely inferior to a second-level law in the mastery realm. However, things were different now. The law of gravity was also a second-grade law, and it was even slightly stronger than the law of lightning. As a result, Bai Qiran no longer had any advantage over the law of lightning. When the law of gravity erupted, the pressure on Bai Qiran naturally increased exponentially. Although it was not enough to crush Bai Qiran and make her lose her ability to fight, it still affected her combat prowess to a certain extent. The most obvious effect was that Bai Qiran's speed had been reduced by at least 30%. After he displayed the law of gravity, the situation on the battlefield quickly reversed. Bai Qiran, who originally had the upper hand, quickly lost it, and the two were once again evenly matched. It was true that the law of lightning had very strong offensive power. However, under the pressure of the law of gravity, Chiron's power was suppressed to the maximum. As a result, the two of them were back to the same starting line. The fierce battles continued, and no one was able to gain the upper hand. In just 3 months, Xiao Chun was already qualified to fight Chiron head-on. He was no longer like he was 3 months ago, when he was at the entrance of the heavenly Yin Valley, where he was constantly suppressed by Chiron. The speed of his growth was too terrifying. The more Chiron fought with Xiao Chun, the more shocked she became. How is this possible? How is this possible? It's only been 3 months. She couldn't help but roar in her heart. She really couldn't believe that a person's strength could change so drastically in just 3 months. It should be noted that for Chiron and Xiao Chen's cultivation, it was normal for them to not make any progress in 3 months, let alone make any progress. After all, it was extremely difficult to make any progress at the level of great perfection Emperor realm. Even if they were the chosen of the saint rankings, it was impossible for them to break through as easily as they did at a lower level. 3 months was nothing to the chosen of the saint rankings. They couldn't do anything at all. And yet, Xiao Chen's strength had undergone a qualitative change in just 3 months. This was something Chiron couldn't accept. However, the stronger Xiao Chen became, the more intense Chiron's killing intent became. Sword and saber clashed, and all sorts of martial techniques erupted. Chiron roared furiously as she fought against Xiao Chun. "Xiao Chun, you're going to die today." Chiron seemed to have foreseen that if she didn't kill Xiao Chun now, Xiao Chun would crush her the next time they met. Therefore, no matter what, Xiao Chun had to die today. With that, an indescribable power drifted out from Chiron's body. The power was similar to the power of intent, but it was much more profound than the power of intent. The power of domain. Xiao Chun murmured softly when he sensed the power Chiron was emitting. Even though Xiao Chun hadn't grasped the power of domain, and his sword intent was still stuck at the peak of the great perfection Emperor realm, it didn't stop Xiao Chun from understanding the power of domain. In fact, in recent years, Xiao Chun had been trying to comprehend the power of domain and transform his sword intent into a sword domain. Unfortunately, Xiao Chun hadn't been able to comprehend a sword domain after all these years. Now that Chiron had displayed a saber domain, it was obvious that he had comprehended the power of domain. As a chosen of the saint rankings, it wasn't strange that Chiron had comprehended the power of domain. As Chiron displayed his saber domain, Xiao Chun was instantly engulfed by it. Sensing the dense saber energy around him and the extreme pressure, Xiao Chun's eyes flashed with a grave expression. "Xiao Chun, you haven't comprehended the power of domain, have you? But you won't have the chance because today is the day you die." Seeing that Xiao Chun was enveloped by the saber domain, but didn't display his sword domain from beginning to end, Chiron easily guessed that Xiao Chun hadn't comprehended the power of domain at all. This discovery calmed Chiron down. Under normal circumstances, the best way to deal with a domain was to display the same power of domain to resist it. This was the simplest and most effective way. It was like a battle between two people. If both of them had comprehended the power of domain and their levels weren't too far apart, then after they displayed the power of domain at the same time, their powers would cancel each other out. In this way, there wouldn't be any suppression from the power of domain. On the other hand, if one of them hadn't comprehended the power of domain, then no matter what they did, they would definitely be suppressed by the power of domain as long as they were within the range of the power of domain. At the same time, they would have to face the attacks of the power of domain. Dense saber intent constantly whistled around Xiao Chun. In order to deal with the attacks of the saber intent, Xiao Chun had no choice but to raise his sword intent to the limit. But even then, even though he'd successfully blocked the saber intent, Xiao Chun was helpless against the pressure of the saber domain, begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1330. The only way to deal with the power of a domain was to have the same power of a domain. When they saw Xiao Chun being enveloped by Chiron's blade domain, The faces of the people from the holy palace below the stage sank. Chun-Ling even said softly, "Oh no, little brother hasn't comprehended the power of a domain yet." It was true that Xiao Chun had yet to comprehend the power of a domain. As such, there was nothing Xiao Chun could do against Bai Qiron's blade domain. All he could do was forcibly resist the pressure of the domain and fight against Bai Qiron. The pressure from the domain was not as simple as the law of gravity. The pressure from the domain mainly came from two aspects. One was the saber intent that filled the saber domain. When facing these saber intents, one had to constantly be on guard. The second was the pressure from spiritual energy. Take Xiao Chun, for example. Within Bai Qiron's blade domain, Xiao Chun could clearly feel that the flow of his spiritual energy had been greatly restricted. It was as if his spiritual energy had been firmly shackled, making it difficult for him to circulate it freely. The double suppression caused Xiao Chun's combat strength to drop significantly. On the other hand, Bai Qiron's strength had been greatly enhanced within the blade domain. Within her blade domain, every strike of Bai Qiron's would receive a boost from the blade domain. Her attack power would multiply, weakening the enemy and strengthening her own. This was the power of domain force. In domain force, she was king. Sensing that Xiao Chun's aura had been greatly suppressed, a confident smile appeared on Bai Qiron's face once more. Without domain force, Xiao Chun could only passively take a beating. If this went on, Bai Qiron would definitely exhaust Xiao Chun to death, even if she had to exhaust him. A sneer appeared on Bai Qiron's face again. She stared coldly at Xiao Chun and tightened her grip on the short blade in her hand. "Xiao Chun, it looks like you're destined to die today." Bai Qiron lashed out with her blade as she spoke. Bai Qiron's attack was at least twice as powerful after she had cast her blade domain. The flash of the blade flashed, and Xiao Chun did not dare to hesitate. He immediately raised his sword to block the attack. The blade and sword collided, but this time it was obvious who had the upper hand. Although he successfully blocked Bai Qiron's attack, Xiao Chun was still forced back several steps. Enveloped by the sword domain, Xiao Chun was once again at a disadvantage. Seeing this, Chun-Ling, who was below the stage, said in a low voice, "Third brother hasn't comprehended the power of a domain. This can't go on. Fighting Bai Qiron in the sword domain is too disadvantageous for the third generation." Xiao Chun was indeed in a very passive position under the shroud of the blade domain, but there was nothing he could do. Without comprehending the power of a domain, Xiao Chun could not break Bai Qiron's blade domain at all. Seeing the hope of victory again, the killing intent in Bai Qiron's eyes grew even stronger. There was a chance. She had a chance to kill Xiao Chun today. She felt refreshed. At the same time, Bai Qiron's attacks became sharper and sharper. She did not give Xiao Chun any chance to catch his breath. Since she saw the opportunity to kill Xiao Chun, Bai Qiron would not give Xiao Chun any chance to turn the situation around. Moreover, the two of them had agreed to a life-and-death battle this time. Even Yinyangzi could not protect Xiao Chun. Therefore, Bai Qiron could openly kill Xiao Chun in the arena. Bai Qiron slashed out with her short blade and roared, "White fish." Bai Clan's 3 blades. This was Bai Qiron's killing move. Xiao Chun had seen the first blade, white fish. However, in the blade domain, the strength of the white fish that Bai Qiron used was completely different from the last time. The space crumbled inch by inch as the blade was unleashed. A huge white fish conjured from the blade aura rushed toward Xiao Chun. With the addition of the blade domain, the power of Bai Qiron's white fish increased by several times. Facing the oncoming slash, Xiao Chun had no room to dodge. He could only face it head-on. Holding the Wuchen's sword tightly in his hand, Xiao Chun slashed out fiercely. 3-9 Luo sword chi were directly displayed. At the same time, he pointed out with his finger and displayed the fish intestine sword finger. 2 saint-level martial skills collided with the white fish. However, to everyone's astonishment, even though Xiao Chun had done his best, he still could not resist the white fish. One side was fiercely suppressed by the blade domain, while the other side was strengthened by the power of the blade domain. The gap between them naturally widened infinitely. After the terrifying white fish blade, Qi defeated the 9 Luo sword Qi and the fish intestine sword finger. It quickly bombarded Xiao Chun. In an instant, Xiao Chen's figure was swallowed by the blade Qi. Seeing this scene, Qin Shiru and the other 3 women in the audience stood up abruptly and looked at the arena with worried expressions. Xiao Chun was easily defeated in a head-on collision. Many disciples present had different expressions when they saw this scene. On the high platform, Yin Kunyo said to Long Yang with a chuckle, "It seems that this battle is about to end. After taking this slash head-on, Xiao Chun will be crippled even if he doesn't die." Yin Kunyo seemed to be certain that Xiao Chun would lose. Her judgment was not wrong. After all, Bai Qiran had comprehended the blade domain, while Xiao Chun had not comprehended the power of a domain. Naturally, there was no way that Xiao Chun could defeat Bai Qiran under the envelopment of the blade domain. However, Long Yang smiled faintly when he heard Yin Kunyo's words. "I'm afraid it's still too early to say that." He did not agree with Yin Kunyo's opinion. Displeasure flashed across Yin Kunyo's face when she heard that. She thought that Long Yang really overestimated Xiao Chun. Under such circumstances, Long Yang still did not believe that Xiao Chun would lose. How laughable! She secretly glanced at Long Yang. However, Long Yang's expression did not change at all. He still had a wretched smile on his face as he looked indifferently at the arena. There were so many disciples in the arena. Perhaps Long Yang was the only one who still thought that Xiao Chun would not lose. However, just when everyone thought that Xiao Chun was bound to lose, Xiao Chun, who was devoured by Bai Qiran, suddenly felt a mysterious force protecting his body. It actually miraculously dissolved the suppression of Bai Qiran's blade domain on him. Without the suppression of the blade domain, Xiao Chen's strength was no longer restricted, and he no longer had any scruples when using it. A mysterious force burst forth from Xiao Chen's body. Without the suppression of the blade domain, Xiao Chun directly slashed with his sword at the white fish blade Qi in front of him. What Xiao Chun did not expect, however, was that the power of the sword attack, which he had hurriedly slashed out, was more than twice as powerful as it usually was. This is the sword domain," Xiao Chun said excitedly with a look of ecstasy in his eyes. Who would have thought that at such a critical moment, the sword intent that had been stuck at the limit of the great perfection stage for several years would break through to the sword domain level without any warning. At the same time, along with Xiao Chen's sword domain determination, a domain power that was extremely similar to Bai Qiran's began to spread and soon merged with the blade domain. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1331. Originally, Xiao Chun was almost certain to lose in the saber domain, but who would have thought that at such a critical moment, his sword intent would make a breakthrough and he would successfully comprehend the power of a domain. With the existence of a sword domain, Xiao Chun was able to greatly reduce Bai Qiran's suppressive power, even though he had only just entered it. It could be said that Xiao Chun was no longer too afraid of Bai Qiran's blade domain. The terrifying pressure originally emitted by the saber domain had also been greatly reduced by the sword domain. Bai Qiran and the many disciples below the stage were all stunned when they sensed the power of the domain that had suddenly begun to spread. Many disciples had strange expressions on their faces. Some were shocked, some were gloomy. At the same time, the people from the sacred palace, including Qin Shu, the 4 girls, and Chen Ling, all relaxed and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Chun had successfully comprehended the sword domain. As a result, the situation of the battle had changed again. It was no longer possible for Bai Qiran to suppress Xiao Chun with the saber domain. Compared to the people below the stage, Bai Qiran's expression was extremely gloomy. Originally, Bai Qiran thought that everything was settled. Xiao Chun, who had not comprehended the power of a domain, was no match for him. But who would have thought that Xiao Chun would actually make a breakthrough in the battle and successfully comprehend the sword domain? As the light of Bai Yu slowly dissipated, Xiao Chen's figure appeared in front of Bai Qiran again. Bai Qiran's face was extremely gloomy when he saw Xiao Chun, who was almost unscathed. On the contrary, Xiao Chun had a faint smile on his face. Bai Qiran, it seems that even the heavens aren't on your side. What other tricks do you have now? Xiao Chun was no weaker than Bai Qiran in terms of cultivation and power of laws. The only advantage Bai Qiran had was the power of a domain, but that advantage was now gone. Moreover, Xiao Chun's physical body was much stronger than Bai Qiran's. After comprehending the sword domain, Bai Qiran wasn't a threat to Xiao Chun at all. Bai Qiran's face sank when she heard Xiao Chun. On the other hand, Xiao Chun clearly had no intention of waiting for Bai Qiran to reply. As soon as he finished speaking, he swung his sword and instantly unleashed the 9 sifting sword. Just like Bai Qiran from before, with a boost from the sword domain, the might of Xiao Chun's attack had increased explosively by a few times as well. The sword aura streaked past. Bai Qiran gritted her teeth when she saw that, but she did not back down. Instead, she lashed out with her blade as well. The blade aura and the sword aura clashed violently. This time, Xiao Chun's Jiuluo sword aura was not as easily broken as it had been before. The power of the two attacks could be said to be evenly matched. Bai Qiran was infuriated by this result. She slashed out with her saber, but she didn't stop. She slashed out with her saber again as she shouted in a deep voice. White Shark! This was the second slash of the Bai clan's 3 blades. It was extremely powerful. With a single slash, the light from the blade shot towards Xiao Chun like a rainbow. In the face of Bai Qiran's attack, Xiao Chun pointed his finger and instantly unleashed the fish intestine sword finger. There was a flash of blood-red light, and it collided with White Shark saber light. Bai Qiran's blade domain no longer had much of a suppressive effect on Xiao Chun, so Xiao Chun's fish intestine sword finger was clearly much more powerful than before. However, Bai clan's 3 blades still gained the upper hand. It couldn't be helped. The Bai clan's 3 blades was a mid-grade Saint-tier martial skill. In terms of grade, it was slightly higher than the fish intestine sword finger's 9 sifting sword chi. However, this difference in strength was already within Xiao Chun's tolerance. After seeing White Shark defeat the fish intestine sword finger, Xiao Chun didn't stop. He unleashed another 9 sifting sword chi to defeat Bai Qiran's White Shark. After blocking Bai Qiran's attack, Xiao Chun immediately moved and charged towards Bai Qiran. Close combat. That was Xiao Chun's intention. He wasn't as good as Bai Qiran in terms of martial skills, but it didn't matter because Xiao Chun's physical strength was clearly much stronger than Bai Qiran's. Now that both of them had comprehended the power of a domain, the difference in their martial skills wasn't too great. As a result, Xiao Chun could completely rely on the strength of his tempered battle body to suppress Bai Qiran in the most crude and simple way. Facing Xiao Chun's attack, Bai Qiran's expression darkened. She raised her saber to meet him. Bai Qiran felt like she had been slapped in the face time and time again while fighting Xiao Chun. One could imagine how furious she was. At this moment, Bai Qiran didn't think about anything else. All she wanted to do was kill Xiao Chun. The two of them fought in close combat. Saber and sword clashed. Terrifying shockwaves constantly spread out and battered the defensive formation around them, causing ripples to appear on the formation. The battle seemed to have returned to an anxious state. However, Long Yang chuckled on the high platform. Looks like the chosen on the saint ranking of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin is going to be replaced. Long Yang's words were undoubtedly saying that the outcome of the battle was already decided. Bai Qiran was definitely going to lose. Hearing that, Yin Kunyo frowned slightly. Even if Xiao Chun has comprehended the sword domain, he might not necessarily be Bai Qiran's match. In terms of martial skills, Bai Qiran still has the advantage. Originally, Yin Kunyo was already certain that Xiao Chun was definitely going to lose. Who would have thought that Xiao Chun would actually break through his sword intent during the battle? That was something that Yin Kunyo hadn't expected. However, even so, Yin Kunyo still believed that Bai Qiran had a greater chance of winning. After all, Bai Qiran still had the advantage in terms of martial skills. However, the advantage wasn't as great as before. Long Yang smiled faintly and said softly, That little bit of advantage probably won't be able to change anything. Yin Kunyo didn't know how terrifying Xiao Chun was, but Long Yang did. Although he hadn't fought Xiao Chun before, Long Yang knew very well that Xiao Chun's physical strength could be described as terrifying. Sometimes, Long Yang even wondered if Xiao Chun was a human. A human could actually possess a physical body that wasn't inferior to the Dragon Clan. In the face of Xiao Chen's terrifying physical body, Bai Qiuran's slight advantage in terms of martial arts techniques was obviously of little use. That was quickly proven. As soon as Long Yang finished speaking, the situation on the arena had changed. Xiao Chun had completely suppressed Bai Qiuran with his powerful physical body and terrifying recovery ability. Bai Qiuran was unable to gain the upper hand in close combat at all. Xiao Chun had just traded injury for injury, but Bai Qiuran didn't dare to do that. He didn't possess Xiao Chen's terrifying recovery ability. As a result, he was naturally at a disadvantage and was about to lose. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1332. In the face of Xiao Chen's terrifying body, Bai Qiuran seemed to be at a loss. Whenever the two of them attacked at the same time, it would always be Bai Qiuran who would pull back in the end and switch to defense. As a result, Bai Qiuran naturally lost the initiative and was constantly suppressed by Xiao Chun. It could be said that Bai Qiuran had fully experienced the terror of Xiao Chen's body. There were several times when Xiao Chun took his attacks head-on. Bai Qiuran was certain that he had definitely injured Xiao Chun, but in the blink of an eye, Xiao Chen's injuries had actually healed. Moreover, his presence showed no signs of weakening at all. This was the terror of the tempered battle body. As long as it was not a fatal injury, as long as it did not exceed the limit of what the body could endure, Xiao Chun would be able to heal his injuries in an instant. It was precisely because of his terrifying body that Xiao Chun dared to clash head-on with Bai Qiuran and agreed to a battle of life and death. Bai Qiuran no longer had the slightest advantage in terms of blade domain, cultivation, and the power of laws. The only advantage he had came from his martial skills, but it could be ignored due to the difference in their physical strength. The longer he fought, the more aggrieved he became. He would definitely lose if he kept defending. As a result, Bai Qiuran was naturally covered in wounds. Blood had already dyed his clothes red. Xiao Chun, on the other hand, looked as if nothing had happened to him at the moment. Although his clothes were torn, his wounds were all healed in an instant. The situation had completely reversed. Bai Qiuran had completely fallen into a disadvantageous position. Anyone could tell that Bai Qiuran could only bitterly hold on against Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun had completely suppressed Bai Qiuran. This scene was difficult for many disciples to accept. Many of them were shocked, especially the disciples of the main branch who follow Bai Qiuran. They all felt like they had swallowed a fly. Despite being a chosen on the saint ranking, Bai Qiuran did not have the temperament of a chosen on the saint ranking at all. She was unable to put up much of a fight against Xiao Chun, which was hard for the disciples of the main branch to accept. The situation was gradually shifting towards Xiao Chen's side. Bai Qiuran was bitterly holding on. At the same time, Yin Yangzi was hiding in the void above the stage. The old servant beside him was slightly behind Yin Yangzi. Yin Yangzi had actually been paying attention to the battle the entire time, but he did not show himself. Yin Yangzi knew that the conflict between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiuran was irreconcilable, so one of them was bound to fall of this battle. As a result, whether Xiao Chun or Bai Qiuran won in the end, it was not something Yin Yangzi wanted to see. However, he had no other choice. He might as well not show himself. Everything would depend on the strength of the two of them. Yin Yangzi had been hiding in the void and watching the battle. At the beginning, when Xiao Chun fell into a disadvantageous position, Yin Yangzi was nervous. However, Xiao Chun soon comprehended the sword domain and displayed it in Xiao Chen's favor. Only then did Yin Yangzi breathe a sigh of relief. Compared to Bai Qiuran, Yin Yangzi was naturally more optimistic about Xiao Chun. He also hoped that Xiao Chun could win. In other words, if Xiao Chun was in any danger today, Yin Yangzi would definitely step in to save him. However, based on the current situation, there was probably no need for him to do anything. Xiao Chun had completely grasped the initiative, and victory was within his grasp. It was only a matter of time before Bai Qiran's defeat. Master, the outcome of this battle has been decided. Do we really not need to be involved? The old servant beside Yin Yangzi also saw that the outcome of the battle had been decided. Upon hearing his words, Yin Yangzi pondered for a few moments before saying indifferently, "There's no need to do anything." But Bai Qiran, Yin Yangzi's meaning was clear. Bai Qiran could only fend for herself. Upon hearing his words, the old servant said hesitantly. Yin Yangzi knew what the old servant wanted to say. Upon seeing the old servant's dilemma, he said helplessly, "There can't be two tigers on one mountain. In that case, we can only choose the strongest." Although Bai Qiran isn't bad, she's still lacking compared to Xiao Chun. To our Sun sect, perhaps 10 Bai Qirans aren't as important as one Xiao Chun. Bai Qiran can only blame herself. Yin Yangzi had always been aware of Xiao Chen's speed of growth. It was especially so now that Xiao Chen's strength had taken a qualitative leap after just 3 months in the dragon race. This made Yin Yangzi even more certain of his choice. The Sun sect needed Xiao Chun. As for Bai Qiran, if Yin Yangzi had to choose between the two of them, he would choose Xiao Chun without hesitation. Upon hearing Yin Yangzi's words, the old servant let out a sigh and didn't say anything else. He could already foresee Bai Qiran's fate. There was almost no chance of survival. Of course, unless Xiao Chun spared him. But was that even possible? As the two of them conversed, the battle on the stage finally drew to a close. It could be said that Bai Qiran had been exhausted to death. With the terrifying might of the tempered battle body, Xiao Chun exhausted Bai Qiran to death bit by bit. Without Xiao Chen's terrifying regenerative abilities and physical strength, Bai Qiran's wounds would only increase with each additional wound. His battle prowess would decrease as a result. After such a long and intense battle, Xiao Chun had traded injuries for injuries and managed to severely injure Bai Qiran. On the other hand, Xiao Chen's presence was still extremely terrifying. The gap between the two of them had completely widened. Bai Qiran could no longer block Xiao Chen's attacks. Seizing the opportunity, Xiao Chun swung his sword. First, he broke through Bai Qiran's defenses. Then, he casually extended a finger. Without giving Bai Qiran any time to react, he instantly unleashed the fishbowl sword finger. A blood-red streak of light streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning. It was impossible to dodge at such speed. However, Bai Qiran was no ordinary person. At the final moment, he did his best to avoid being hit in his vitals. Even so, the fishbowl sword finger still passed through Bai Qiran's abdomen. A bloody hole appeared there. At the same time, the sharp sword intent traveled through the wound and wreaked havoc in Bai Qiran's body. Bai Qiran spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Then, he slammed heavily into the stage. Clearly, he was no longer able to fight. Enduring the pain, Bai Qiran tried to stand up. Unfortunately, he was unable to do so. In the end, he could only sit on the ground, gasping for breath. The disciples below the stage all gasped when they saw Bai Qiran's complete defeat. At the same time, countless eyes locked onto Xiao Chun. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1333. There was a small accident that caused me to only reach home now. I don't think I will be able to rush out the 2 chapters tonight. However, I will write it now and post it tomorrow. So, there will be 6 chapters tomorrow. Brothers, please forgive me. Sword Master 8 Desolations will be updated tomorrow. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1334. No one had expected this to happen. After all, Bai Qiran was a chosen on the saint rankings. Not only in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin, but across the entire human domain and even the central world, he was a renowned figure. Compared to Bai Qiran, Xiao Chun clearly paled in comparison. The main reason was that Xiao Chun was not from the central world, so he was not well known. However, It was precisely because of this difference that the battle ended with Bai Qiron's defeat. Even though there had been many twists and turns along the way, Bai Qiron had still lost in the end. There was nothing he could do about it. Under countless gazes, Xiao Chen walked towards Bai Qiron step by step. As Xiao Chen's footsteps rang out, each step seemed to stomp on everyone's hearts. Many disciples could not help but break out in cold sweat. The battle was over. Needless to say, all the disciples present knew what was going to happen next. This was a battle of life and death between Xiao Chen and Bai Qiron. Since Bai Qiron had lost, how could Xiao Chen let him go, given the enmity between them? Xiao Chen walked up to Bai Qiron and looked down at her from above. His expression was calm as he said in an indifferent tone, "You really shouldn't have done those things, but it's all over now." The biggest reason why Xiao Chen wanted to kill Bai Qiron was because of what he had done to Flower Fairy and the others. It could be said that Flower Fairy and the others were Xiao Chen's reverse scale. Since Bai Qiron had done something like that, there was no reason for Xiao Chen to let him go. As he spoke, Xiao Chen slowly raised the Wuchen sword in his hand. However, to everyone's surprise, even though Bai Qiron's life was hanging by a thread, there was not much change in her expression. There was not even a trace of fear on her face. Instead, she looked at Xiao Chen with murderous intent. "Xiao Chen, do you think you can kill me like this?" It was a somewhat inexplicable sentence, but as soon as Bai Qiron finished speaking, several figures suddenly appeared in the air above the arena. There were a total of 5 people, and 4 of them were quasi-saint great sovereigns. However, these 4 quasi-saint great sovereigns were clearly not the leaders. The real leader was a young man in luxurious clothes, standing in the middle of the 4. The young man had sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and a handsome appearance. Especially his temperament. It was even more unforgettable. His entire person was like an unsheathed sharp jian yi, causing others to not dare to look directly at him. One of the disciples cried out in shock. Xianyuan Baizhan. Xianyuan Baizhan was a holy disciple who was ranked at the 10th position on the hallowed rankings. At the same time, he was the young master of a Xianyuan clan. Regardless of whether it was his status or strength, Bai Qiron couldn't compare to him at all. It should have been time for the battle to end, but Xianyuan Baizhan's sudden appearance made things even more complicated. No one present believed that Xianyuan Baizhan had come to the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin to be a guest. Since Xianyuan Baizhan was here, there had to be a reason. As expected, under the gazes of the disciples of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin, Xianyuan Baizhan looked indifferently at Xiao Chen. "Victory and defeat have been decided, but you can't kill him. Let's go." Xianyuan Baizhan's voice was calm, like an emperor looking down on all living things. However, his voice was filled with an undeniable dignity. Xiao Chen had never seen Xianyuan Baizhan before, but he already knew who he was from the cries of the surrounding disciples. As the first holy disciple of the human race, ranked 10th on the hallowed rankings, Xianyuan Baizhan was undoubtedly famous in the human race. There was almost no one who didn't know of him. However, there was one thing that Xiao Chen despised. Although Xianyuan Baizhan was the first holy disciple of the human race, the strongest of the younger generation, he was only ranked 3rd on the hallowed rankings. From this, one could see the situation and status of the human race in the central world. Don't underestimate the hallowed rankings. To a large extent, the rankings on the hallowed rankings represented the strength of a race. Take Long Yang, for example. As the strongest of the younger generation of the Beastmen, he was ranked 3rd on the hallowed rankings. From this, one could see how powerful the Beastmen were. In the central world, they were fully deserving of the title of Overlord. It could be said that Xianyuan Baizhan was an existence revered by tens of thousands of people in the human race. But in the 100 races of the great world, he was neither high nor low. At the very least, someone like Long Yang would definitely look down on Xianyuan Baizhan. Even if he did attach some importance to Xianyuan Baizhan, it would only be a little. In the face of Xianyuan Baizhan's cold words, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change much. Instead, it was Bai Qiron who actually struggled to stand up, perhaps because she had seen her savior. That's right. Xinyuan Baijian had come because of Bai Qiran. In fact, after learning that Shao Chun had secretly left the Taiyang sect and that he had lost the chance to kill Shao Chun, Bai Qiran had made sufficient preparations for this battle. Most importantly, she had secretly sent a message to Xinyuan Baijian so that she could save her own life if he was no match for Shao Chun. Bai Qiran also knew that the enmity between her and Shao Chun could be said to be irreconcilable, so Bai Qiran had prepared this escape route for herself. As for why Xinyuan Baijian would help Bai Qiran, the reason was because of Bai Qiran's cousin. Bai Qiran's cousin was called Bai Jin. She was the only daughter of Bai Mulin, Bai Qiran's third uncle. Although her cultivation talent wasn't great, there was nothing to say about her appearance. She had been known as the #1 beauty of the human race in the Central world since she was young. Therefore, with her looks, Bai Jin naturally became Xinyuan Baijian's woman. Of course, she was only one of his women, a beauty paired with a hero. It was because of Bai Jin that Xinyuan Baijian was willing to personally take action to save Bai Qiran's life. Of course, this was also the only chance. Standing up, Bai Qiran looked coldly at Shao Chun and sneered, "Shao Chun, I told you that you can't kill me today. Our matter isn't over yet." Xinyuan Baijian's appearance allowed Bai Qiran to see a chance to live. It also made her believe that her life was safe. After all, Xinyuan Baijian was present. How could Shao Chun kill her? In the human domain, there had never been a situation where Xinyuan Baijian couldn't protect someone he wanted to protect. Unfortunately, Bai Qiran had misjudged Shao Chun. Or perhaps she had underestimated Shao Chun. In the past, Shao Chun didn't fear Bai Qiran. Now, Shao Chun wouldn't fear Xinyuan Baijian either. So, as soon as Bai Qiran finished speaking and before the smile on her face could fully bloom, a ray of light flashed, and then her head flew into the air. Even in death, Bai Qiran still had that smile that hadn't fully bloomed on her face. Today's 6th update, brothers. The first update is for your collection, for your monthly votes, for your recommendation. Chapter 1335. He completely ignored Bai Qiran. As soon as he finished speaking, Shao Chun ended his life with a single strike. Everyone present could clearly see that even in death, Bai Qiran still had a smile that hadn't fully bloomed on his face. Perhaps even Bai Qiran felt that his life was no longer in danger when he saw Xinyuan Baijian. After all, who would have thought that Shao Chun would actually dare to kill Bai Qiran right in front of Xinyuan Baijian? Unfortunately, that was the truth. Shao Chun didn't hesitate at all when facing Xinyuan Baijian. He didn't hesitate at all, nor was he conflicted or fearful. He killed Bai Qiran in an extremely straightforward manner. The surrounding disciples were stunned by such an outcome. Xinyuan Baijian was stunned as well. However, after a short moment of blankness, rage surged within Xinyuan Baijian's heart. He glared at Shao Chun. Shao Chun instantly felt a tremendous pressure when Bai Qiran locked onto him. Although they hadn't fought yet, and Xinyuan Baijian hadn't revealed too much of his terrifying aura, Shao Chun was certain that Xinyuan Baijian and Bai Qiran weren't on the same level. The difference between the two of them wasn't like the difference between clouds and mud, but at the very least, there was a huge gap between them. It was like being stared at by a furious beast. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. However, Shao Chun still raised his head and fearlessly met Xinyuan Baijian's gaze. Their eyes met, and Xinyuan Baijian's voice became extremely cold. "Didn't you hear me when I told you to stop? Didn't you see that I was going to kill him?" Shao Chun refused to back down. Xinyuan Baijian had made it clear that he wanted to protect Bai Qiran, but Shao Chun had actually killed him with a single strike of the sword. Xinyuan Baijian didn't even have the time to react. Of course, it was also because Xinyuan Baijian was too careless. Or perhaps, Xinyuan Baijian had never imagined that someone amongst the younger generation of the human race would actually dare to go against his will. As the emperor of the younger generation, Xinyuan Baijian felt that his dignity was being challenged. Not only did he kill Bai Qiran, but Shao Chun also didn't give him any face when talking to him. Xinyuan Baijian didn't know how many years it had been since he heard such words. Killing intent gathered in his eyes. However, at this moment, Yin Yangzi and the old servant appeared in the sky. At the same time, several half-step great saints of the Taiyang sect also appeared one after another. There were a total of 8 of them. Aside from Yin Yangzi, the 8 of them were all half-step great saints. As soon as the 8 of them appeared, Yin Yangzi took the initiative to look at Xinyuan Baijian. Xinyuan Baijian, let's end this matter here. Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran agreed on a life-and-death battle. It's against the rules for outsiders to interfere. Yin Yangzi immediately spoke up for Xiao Chun. Of course, this was normal. After all, Xiao Chun was a disciple of the Taiyang sect, while Xinyuan Baijian wasn't. Yin Yangzi would definitely side with Xiao Chun. As a great sage, since Yin Yangzi had spoken, this matter should have ended. After all, who would dare to oppose the words of the great sage? But after hearing those words, Xinyuan Baijian looked at Xiao Chun with a cold expression and sneered. Is this what you're relying on? Do you think that with the experts of the Taiyang sect here, I can't do anything to you? Xinyuan Baijian thought that Xiao Chun was relying on the protection of Yin Yangzi and the others. This was simply laughable. Without waiting for Xiao Chun's reply, Xinyuan Baijian first said to the 4 experts of the Xinyuan family beside him, "You don't have to do anything." Then, he looked at Yin Yangzi and casually bowed. Then, he said indifferently, "Senior, you haven't forgotten the rules of the saint ranking, right?" First, he told his 4 experts not to do anything. Then, he mentioned the rules of the saint ranking. Hearing this, Yin Yangzi's expression didn't change, as if he didn't care about Xinyuan Baijian's attitude at all. He smiled and said, "Of course I know. That's good." Hearing this, Xinyuan Baijian smiled and quickly turned his gaze to Xiao Chun. At the same time, he slowly descended onto the arena. As for the formation protecting the arena, it could be said that Xinyuan Baijian had easily broken it. He had easily destroyed the formation that could withstand the battle between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran. Just this alone was enough to prove Xinyuan Baijian's strength. He slowly landed in front of Xiao Chun. The 2 of them faced each other. At this moment, Xiao Chun felt even more pressure. He wasn't in a hurry to attack. In Xinyuan Baijian's opinion, Xiao Chun wasn't a threat at all. Therefore, Xinyuan Baijian smiled and looked coldly at Xiao Chun. You should be new to the saint ranking. Perhaps you don't know the rules of the saint ranking. Today, I'll tell you the truth. On the saint ranking, even if you have the great sage protecting you, if you don't have the strength, only death awaits you. Xinyuan Baijian's meaning was very clear. Yin Yangzi wouldn't be able to protect Xiao Chun today. Why did Xinyuan Baijian have such confidence? To put it bluntly, it was because of the special nature of the saint ranking. Due to the protection of the will of the heavenly Tao, even a great sage or emperor couldn't attack a holy son of the saint ranking. As a result, the older generation experts of the various clans naturally had some unwritten rules. Once it involved a battle between the chosen on the hallowed rankings, then no matter who it was, the older generation experts couldn't interfere. Life and death were up to fate, and it all depended on the strength of these little fellows. In other words, if Xinyuan Baijian wanted to attack Xiao Chun, Yin Yangzi and the others couldn't interfere. Whether or not Xiao Chun could survive Xinyuan Baijian's attack would depend on his own ability. The saint ranking could be considered an independent battlefield that stood above the 100 clans. However, the people on this battlefield were all the young geniuses of the various clans. The strength of the power behind those who were ranked on the saint ranking wasn't really important. Because even if you had a powerful background, so what? In any case, the older generation experts couldn't attack a chosen on the saint ranking. This was a rule of the will of the heavenly way, and no one could violate it. So, the most important thing on the saint ranking was still strength. Everything depended on strength. A wisp of a mocking expression flashed through Xinyuan Baijian's eyes as he looked coldly at Xiao Chun. It felt like a cat playing with a mouse. However, Xiao Chun's expression didn't change at all when faced with Xinyuan Baijian's enormous pressure. He had to kill Bai Qiran, but he wasn't courting death or making a fool of himself. Xiao Chun was confident in his ability to deal with Xinyuan Baijian. So, after hearing Xinyuan Baijian's words, Xiao Chun slowly turned his gaze towards the high platform. Xinyuan Baijian sneered when he saw that. What? Do you think there's anyone who can save you now? Could it be that you think Yun Kunyo from the Yin and Yang sects can stop me? Second update, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1336. Xiao Chun turned to look at the stage. Xinyuan Baijian thought that Xiao Chun wanted to help Yin Kunyo, the other chosen on the saint ranking. After all, the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect only had 2 saints on the saint ranking, and Yun Kunyo was the strongest among the younger generation of the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. At this time, Xiao Chun could only ask for help from Yun Kunyo. But so what? In Xinyuan Baijian's opinion, he didn't even need to care about Yun Kunyo. There was still a gap between Yun Kunyo and Xinyuan Baijian. She wasn't the strongest among the younger generation of the human race for nothing. However, Xinyuan Baijian didn't know that Xiao Chun had no intention of asking Yun Kunyo for help. Following Xiao Chun's gaze, Long Yang, who was on the high platform, smiled bitterly. Seeing this, Yun Kunyo frowned and said, "Why? Do you want to stand out? Are you willing to offend Xinyuan Baijian just because of your relationship with Xiao Chun?" Yun Kunyo was sitting right next to Long Yang, so she could naturally feel the change in Long Yang. However, in Yun Kunyo's opinion, the relationship between Long Yang and Xiao Chun was not enough for Long Yang to step in and offend Xinyuan Baijian. She thought that Xiao Chun and Long Yang were just ordinary friends. However, she didn't know that there was Long Qing between the two of them. Long Qing was Xiao Chen's second sister, and Long Yang was Long Qing's biological brother. Their relationship was different. In addition, Long Yang knew very well how much his father loved his sister. If the Dragon Emperor knew that he did not make a move today, he was afraid that the Dragon Emperor would not let him go. Moreover, in Long Yang's opinion, Xiao Chen's talent was definitely more important than Xinyuan Baijian's in the future. Therefore, in Long Yang's opinion, offending Xinyuan Baijian for Xiao Chun was worth it no matter how he looked at it. However, before Long Yang could reply, Feng Zhu had already stood up and said indifferently, "Xinyuan Baijian, you think too highly of Xinyuan Baijian? Huh, aren't you overestimating him? So what if I offend him?" After saying that, before Yun Kunyo could reply, Feng Zhu took a step forward and instantly appeared on the arena. Xinyuan Baijian was known as the #1 in the younger generation of the human race. No one in the human race dared to provoke him, but Feng Zhu didn't care about this identity at all. The reason was very simple. In Feng Zhu's opinion, this title of #1 person in the human clan's younger generation was completely meaningless. Firstly, Feng Zhu was ranked 6th on the saint rankings. She was stronger than Xinyuan Baijian. Secondly, the Beast clan was obviously stronger than the human clan. Moreover, the Phoenix Wang Yi clan was strong enough to crush the human clan. So, as the princess of the Phoenix Huang Yi clan, Feng Zhu had no reason to fear Xinyuan Baijian. Originally, Xinyuan Baijian still had a dignified appearance on the stage, but suddenly a figure appeared beside Xiao Chun. She wore a red dress, had a delicate figure, and an extremely beautiful face. When such a woman appeared, Xinyuan Baijian's expression instantly changed. He stared blankly at the woman in the red dress in front of him. Xinyuan Baijian's expression slightly changed. Feng Zhu, as one of the top 10 on the saint rankings, Xinyuan Baijian naturally recognized Feng Zhu. But in the face of Xinyuan Baijian's surprise, Feng Zhu didn't give him any face at all. "I'll protect Xiao Chun. Xinyuan Baijian, if you dare to lift a finger, I guarantee that you won't be able to walk out of the heavenly Yin Yang sect today. Even if your Xinyuan ancestor comes, it'll still be the same." Feng Zhu didn't give Xinyuan Baijian any face at all. She returned Xinyuan Baijian's previous words word for word, and even became more arrogant. She said that if Xinyuan Baijian dared to make a move, she would kill him in the heavenly Yin Yang sect today. When he saw and heard Feng Zhu's words, Xin Yuan Baijian's expression turned extremely ugly. When facing Yin Yangzi, Xin Yuan Baijian had to be respectful, but he didn't need to care too much. Although Yin Yangzi had the strength to kill him, he couldn't attack him. But Feng Zhu was different. Feng Zhu was stronger than Xin Yuan Baijian, and she could attack him without any scruples. Both of them were of the younger generation, and they were both chosen on the saint rankings. Even if Feng Zhu killed Xin Yuan Baijian, she wouldn't be punished by the heavenly way. Xin Yuan Baijian didn't expect Feng Zhu to appear here. When they saw Feng Zhu appear, the Sacred Palace faction below the stage breathed a sigh of relief. Since Feng Zhu had appeared, Xin Yuan Baijian naturally had nothing to fear. Feng Zhu, Qin Shiru's group of 4, and Long Qing were no strangers to her. After all, she and Long Yang had lived in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect for nearly a year, and everyone had interacted with her before. As for Xiao Chun, who was standing behind Feng Zhu, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Originally, Xiao Chun wanted to let Long Yang take action, but who knew that Feng Zhu would step forward first and be so supportive. He was familiar with Long Yang and Feng Zhu, and the two's existence was the real reason why Xiao Chun dared to kill Bai Qiran in front of Xin Yuan Baijian. After all, Xiao Chun wasn't stupid enough to think that he could fight against Xin Yuan Baijian. Sometimes, having more friends was also a kind of strength. Just like now, Xin Yuan Baijian was indeed stronger than Xiao Chun, but so what? With Feng Zhu here, what could Xin Yuan Baijian do? The sudden appearance, the merciless words, and Feng Zhu's attitude made Xin Yuan Baijian's expression extremely gloomy. At the same time, there was a burning pain on his face, as if he had been slapped twice. With so many disciples of the Heavenly Yin Sun sect watching, Xin Yuan Baijian naturally didn't want to admit defeat. After all, as the first holy son of the human race, if he admitted defeat now, wouldn't his prestige be swept to the ground in the future? The more talented a person was, the more important they were, the more they cared about their face. Xin Yuan Baijian was no exception to this. Therefore, at this moment, it was absolutely impossible for Xin Yuan Baijian to admit defeat. Therefore, after hearing Feng Zhu's words, Xin Yuan Baijian's face turned cold. After a moment of silence, he said coldly, "Feng Zhu, don't be so arrogant. Feng Zhu, don't speak too confidently. Do you think that you can keep me here by yourself?" Xin Yuan Baijian said. Feng Zhu did give Xin Yuan Baijian a lot of pressure, but the difference in strength between the two was limited. Even if Xin Yuan Baijian couldn't defeat Feng Zhu, he could still protect himself. In other words, Xin Yuan Baijian wasn't Feng Zhu's opponent, but if he wanted to leave, Feng Zhu wouldn't be able to stop him. His life wasn't in danger, so Xin Yuan Baijian acted as if he had nothing to fear. However, just as Xin Yuan Baijian finished speaking, a somewhat lazy and helpless voice came from the high platform. "Sai, what if I join in? Can I make you stay?" As the voice rang out, Xin Yuan Baijian's gaze immediately followed the direction of the voice. He saw that on the high platform, a young man wearing a purple gold dragon robe had already proudly stood up. He had a lazy smile on his face as he spoke. Third update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 1337. What if I join in? Will I be able to keep you here? An indifferent voice sounded from the stage. At the same time, a young man wearing a purple gold dragon robe stood proudly at the edge of the stage, looking at Xin Yuan Baijian with a lazy smile. This young man was none other than Long Yang. Previously, when Feng Zhu had appeared, Long Yang had given up on the idea of fighting. After all, Feng Zhu was enough to suppress Xin Yuan Baijian. But who would have thought that Xin Yuan Baijian would have no sense of propriety? Even when Feng Zhu appeared, Xin Yuan Baijian had no intention of backing down. Hearing Long Yang's indifferent words, Xin Yuan Baijian looked at the stage. Previously, Xin Yuan Baijian was completely arrogant, so he naturally didn't care who was sitting on the stage. But now, with Long Yang's appearance, Xin Yuan Baijian's expression couldn't be described with the word ugly anymore. With just Feng Zhu, Xin Yuan Baijian still had the ability to protect himself. But with Long Yang, it was hard to say. Although Xin Yuan Baijian wasn't unfamiliar with Long Yang, he couldn't see through him at all. Long Yang was like a bottomless pit, where it could be said that Long Yang had never shown his true strength in front of him. On the Saint ranking, the top 3 were as monstrous as 3 insurmountable mountains. Among the 108 chosen on the Saint ranking, there was a huge gap between Long Yang and the other chosen on the Saint ranking in terms of strength and talent. The top 3 were like a ranking within a ranking. In a one-on-one situation, Xin Yuan Baijian didn't have the slightest confidence to deal with Long Yang, let alone now that it was 2 against 1, with Feng Zhu glaring at him from the side. Staring at Long Yang, under Xin Yuan Baijian's gaze, Long Yang floated down from the stage and landed firmly on the stage, standing side by side with Feng Zhu. With the appearance of Long Yang, Xin Yuan Baijian finally felt the pressure and danger. It was a fatal danger. Feng Zhu and Long Yang already had the ability to kill him, and the 2 of them were completely unscrupulous. They didn't have to worry about the will of the Heavenly Way's punishment, and they didn't have to fear the revenge of the Xin Yuan clan. The pressure in Xin Yuan Baijian's heart increased. At that moment, Feng Zhu's words made Xin Yuan Baijian's hair stand on end. "I want to kill this guy." As soon as he spoke, Feng Zhu directly stated that he wanted to kill Xin Yuan Baijian. Not only did his words cause Xin Yuan Baijian's heart to clench, but even the 4 Xin Yuan experts who had retreated to the side became nervous at this moment. They didn't even think about it before moving closer to Xin Yuan Baijian. With Long Yang and Feng Zhu joining forces, they were completely capable of killing Xin Yuan Baijian. Naturally, the 4 Xin Yuan experts couldn't sit idly by and watch Xin Yuan Baijian be killed here. Therefore, if Long Yang and Feng Zhu attacked, the 4 of them would definitely block them and think of a way to make Xin Yuan Baijian leave. Of course, the 4 Xin Yuan experts only dared to block them. They didn't dare to kill Long Yang and Feng Zhu. Otherwise, not to mention the Dragon Clan and Huangyi Clan, the will of the Heavenly Way would immediately kill them on the spot. However, just as the 4 of them were about to make a move, several half-step great saints from the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin directly blocked their path. Seeing the experts of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin make a move, the 4 Xin Yuan experts' expressions changed. The strongest among them looked at Yin Yangzi and respectfully bowed. "Senior, what is the meaning of this?" The experts of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin must have been instructed by Yin Yangzi to block them. The Xin Yuan expert asked respectfully when he saw this. Xin Yuan Baijian didn't need to think too much about Yin Yangzi, but the same couldn't be said for them. However, Yin Yangzi only smiled faintly in the face of this person's respectful inquiry. "You're the one who said this is a matter between the chosen of the saint rankings, so us old fellows shouldn't meddle in other people's business. Let the young people deal with their own matters. Moreover, I don't think you're willing to be killed on the spot by the will of the Heavenly Way, right?" Yin Yangzi's voice was very calm and indifferent, but in the ears of the 4 Xin Yuan experts, they felt helpless. What was this? Who knew that Long Yang and Feng Zhu of the Beast Race would be in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin? Moreover, they had such a relationship with Shao Chun. In the end, Feng Zhu had even declared that he would kill Xin Yuan Wudi on the spot. If it was any other time, probably no one would believe such words. After all, there were only a mere 9 people in the younger generation who could kill Xin Yuan Wudi. Moreover, even if he faced 9 people, as long as he didn't encounter one of the top 3 freaks, Xin Yuan Baijian was completely capable of protecting himself and escaping. Unfortunately, he just happened to encounter Feng Zhu and Long Yang in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. No one knew what Xin Yuan Baijian's chances of escaping alive were, but the 4 Xin Yuan experts didn't dare gamble. Because if Feng Zhu and Long Yang were determined to kill Xin Yuan Baijian, and Xin Yuan Baijian just happened to be unable to escape and died on the spot, then it would absolutely be a disaster for the entire Xin Yuan clan. After all, there was no second Xin Yuan Wudi in the Xin Yuan clan. Once Xin Yuan Wudi died, then it was very likely that there would be a gap in the younger generation of the Xinyuan clan. The consequences of that were unimaginable. They didn't dare gamble, and they absolutely didn't dare let anything happen to Xinyuan Baijian. However, Yingyangzi's meaning was very clear. This was the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin, so the four of them should obediently stand aside and watch the show. Without his permission, the four of them wouldn't be able to move a single finger. The four of them had no choice but to look at each other. Then, the Xinyuan expert who had spoken to Yingyangzi earlier sighed and said, "There's nothing we can do. Send a message to the ancestor and tell him to personally come to the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin." What the hell was this? They came here aggressively, thinking that they could suppress all the heroes. But who knew that in the end, not only did they not get what they wanted, they even lost their lives. They had no choice but to contact the ancestor of the Xinyuan clan and ask him to personally come to rescue them. The four quasi-sage great venerables of the Xinyuan clan felt bitter in their hearts. On the arena, Xinyuan Baijian was also extremely furious. Of course, there was also a trace of nervousness and fear in his soaring fury. Feng Zhu's words made Xinyuan Wudi's heart tighten, and Long Yang's following words made Xinyuan Wudi feel even more humiliated. Of course, the fear in his heart became even stronger. As soon as Feng Zhu's voice fell, Long Yang stared at Xinyuan Baijian from head to toe for a long time, then pretended to be helpless and said to Feng Zhu, "Do you really want to kill him? It will be very troublesome." Fourth update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1338. Long Yang looked at Xinyuan Baijian for a while, then turned to Feng Zhu and said, "Do you really want to kill him? It'll be troublesome." In other words, as long as Long Yang was willing, he was confident he could kill Xinyuan Baijian. However, he would have to pay a great price. Hearing Long Yang's words, the fury in Xinyuan Baijian's eyes almost shot out. However, at the same time, the last bit of reason in his mind kept telling him that he couldn't be impulsive. At least, he couldn't fight Long Yang at this time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. He didn't have the courage to fight Long Yang because he knew he wasn't Long Yang's match. Although he was furious, he was also extremely nervous. However, Xinyuan Baijian also heard the conversation between the four Xinyuan experts. He knew they had already sent a message to their ancestor. At this moment, Xinyuan Baijian only had one thought in his mind, and that was that his ancestor would come as soon as possible. He didn't want to fight, nor did want to admit defeat. Xinyuan Baijian's pride didn't allow him to lower his head in front of so many people. He knew very well what the consequences would be if he lowered his head in front of Long Yang and Feng Zhu. Therefore, Xinyuan Baijian very cleverly chose to remain silent. He didn't want to fight, nor did he want to admit defeat. Facing Xinyuan Baijian's appearance, Feng Zhu said coldly, "Even if it's troublesome, I'll kill him." He still wanted to kill him. Hearing that, the disciples below the stage were all stunned. At this moment, Xinyuan Baijian couldn't remain calm. His eyes were fixed on Long Yang and Feng Zhu, guarding against any sudden attack. While Xinyuan Baijian was secretly on guard, Long Yang helplessly shook his head and smiled bitterly. "All right, but you have to fight too." "Naturally," Feng Zhu sneered. Then, their auras locked onto Xinyuan Baijian at the same time. At this moment, Xinyuan Baijian felt the hairs on his back stand. From Feng Zhu and Long Yang's eyes, Xinyuan Baijian could feel traces of the aura of death. Without any superfluous words, Feng Zhu took the initiative to attack. His palm seemed to be casually swatting out. However, as his palm swatted down, a dense black flame spread out and instantly enveloped the entire arena. Seeing that Feng Zhu had made his move, Xinyuan Baijian was the first to react. A silver-white light shot out from his body and into the sky. Soon after, the black flame and the silver-white light violently collided. While Feng Zhu and Xinyuan Baijian were fighting, Long Yang gently pushed Xiao Chun out of the ring and said faintly, "Xiao Chun, don't be so arrogant. Brother Xiao, you have to treat me to a drink when this is over." To Long Yang, killing Xianyuan Baijian was very troublesome, and there was no benefit to him. However, since it was related to Xiao Chun, and Feng Zhu was determined to kill Xianyuan Baijian, Long Yang had no choice but to do it. Hearing Long Yang's words, Xiao Chun nodded slightly in agreement. At the same time, he had no intention of rushing up to participate in the battle. Xiao Chun's character was very unyielding, but this unyielding character did not mean that he was stupid. At the same time, Xiao Chun was very clear about his own strength. He would not indulge in such an illusory dream. He knew that his current strength was only at the lower level of the saint ranking. Compared to Long Yang, Feng Zhu, Xianyuan Baijian, and the other top 10 saint ranking chosens, he was still inferior. For example, the black flame that Feng Zhu had unleashed was the third level of the law of undying flames. Moreover, Feng Zhu had already comprehended it to the mastery realm. A third-level law was already comparable to the law of time and the law of space. As for Xianyuan Baijian, that silver-white light should be a unique physique. However, its power was also extremely terrifying. Just by looking at the tip of the iceberg of the three people's combat strength, one could tell that Xiao Chun was not qualified to participate in such a battle. Not to mention Xiao Chun, even Yin Kunya was only qualified to stand aside. There was no possibility of her interfering at all. It was not an exaggeration to say that in a battle between the three people, unless one was also a saint who was also ranked in the top 10 of the saint ranking, no one would be able to withstand the aftermath of the battle. Even if they did not die, they would be severely injured. Because he was very clear about his current strength and position, Xiao Chun very calmly gave up the arena to the three of them and let them settle it themselves. Xiao Chun did not feel that there was anything shameful about it. In Xiao Chun's opinion, a person had to be able to withstand wealth, but he also had to be able to withstand being looked down upon and ridiculed. Under normal circumstances, acting tough and fighting out of a moment of anger would not end well. He might even lose more face because of this. Just like now, if Xianyuan Baijian had wisely chosen to retreat when Feng Zhu appeared at the beginning, then all these things would not have happened, and Long Yang would not have appeared. Unfortunately, Xianyuan Baijian was showing off at that time and did not give Feng Zhu any face. As the princess of the Feng Huangyi clan, Feng Zhu's temper was not very good. Although she was not unruly, she definitely had a fiery temper. Therefore, Xianyuan Baijian could be said to be riding a tiger and unable to back down. At the same time, he had lost even more face. In front of tens of thousands of heavenly Yin and solar sex disciples, Xianyuan Baijian was besieged by Long Yang and Feng Zhu. When the three of them attacked, Xianyuan Baijian was directly suppressed. Fortunately, his strength was not bad and he was able to withstand a few attacks. Otherwise, he would have been beaten to the ground by Long Yang and Feng Zhu. However, even if he could withstand a few attacks, Xianyuan Baijian could still be said to be in an extremely sorry state, especially after Long Yang attacked. Compared to Feng Zhu's terrifying power of the law of undying flames, Long Yang's attack did not have such a vast aura, but still gave off a fatal threat and an extremely mysterious feeling. Even Yin Yangzi, who was in the sky, looked at Long Yang with a hint of emotion in his eyes, and he murmured unconsciously, "The law of air, to be able to make the great sage like Yin Yangzi lose his mind." One could see how terrifying Long Yang's law of air was. Unlike Yin Yangzi, most of the disciples present did not know about the law of air because it was too profound for them. However, everyone could clearly see that every time Long Yang attacked, although it was always understated, Long Yang's every move would cause a wisp of ethereal air to flow around his body. At the same time, the one who felt the most was Xianyuan Baijian. Facing Long Yang, Xianyuan Baijian's heart was already at its limit. If he had known earlier, Xianyuan Baijian would never have confronted Long Yang. Fifth update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 1339. Everyone knew that the most powerful laws in the world were the laws of time and the laws of space. However, they did not know that in addition to these two great laws, there were also some extremely ancient level 3 laws that very few people could comprehend. Long Yang's law of air was one of them. Air was the most basic existence in this world. Although it couldn't be seen or touched, it really existed. Moreover, for ordinary people, air was essential. Without it, they couldn't live. Although warriors were less reliant on air to a large extent, it was the same as warriors being able to stay underwater for a long time. But even so, once the surrounding air changed, it would have a huge impact on the warrior. The most important problem was that once the air became thin or dense in an instant, the surrounding pressure would obviously undergo a huge change. This was just like Long Yang's attack. Along with Long Yang's attack, the air around Xinyuan Baijian's body was almost sucked dry. Xinyuan Baijian felt as if his entire body was as light as a feather. Because the air was directly sucked dry by Long Yang, Xinyuan Baijian's body couldn't adapt to this change. Therefore, the power of his attack was obviously greatly reduced. Damn it! This was the first time Xinyuan Baijian and Long Yang fought. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. Although Feng Zhu was stronger than him, Xinyuan Baijian still had the strength to fight against her. However, when facing Long Yang, Xinyuan Baijian felt as if all his strength had been wasted on cotton. He couldn't use any strength at all. Not knowing where to start was the most frustrating thing. And this was the feeling that Long Yang gave Xinyuan Baijian. The law of air made Xinyuan Baijian feel helpless. However, what Xinyuan Baijian didn't expect was that the law of air, which was almost comparable to the law of time and space, didn't only have a little ability. Long Yang gently stretched out his right palm. Then, golden spiritual energy constantly gathered on his right palm and formed a golden ball of light. Dragon breath. She still had a faint smile on her face as she spoke softly. After she finished speaking, the golden ball of light began to slowly dissipate. Soon after, it disappeared into the surrounding air. It seemed like he had done something insignificant, but with the disappearance of the golden ball of light, Xinyuan Baijian quickly felt as if something had invaded his body. The circulation of spiritual energy in his meridians began to be obstructed, and at the same time, his dantian seemed to have suffered an attack. The sudden change startled Xinyuan Baijian. He quickly put some distance between himself and Long Yang and Feng Zhu, then looked inside his body. With a single glance, Xinyuan Baijian could see countless small dagger-like golden spirit energy attacking his meridians and dantian. This golden spiritual energy was exactly the same as the golden ball in Long Yang's hand, which meant that this golden spiritual energy was definitely Long Yang's doing. But how did Long Yang inject this spiritual energy into his body? Regardless of a cultivator's cultivation level, as long as they had condensed their dantian, they would have a layer of spiritual energy protecting them. Not to mention that Long Yang hadn't even touched him. Even if Long Yang's attack had hit him, he still wouldn't have been able to inject spiritual energy into his body. If he could really do this, then cultivators of the same cultivation level would only need to hit each other once to be able to inject spiritual energy into each other's body. While he was shocked, Long Yang spoke indifferently. Don't think too much. I have comprehended the law of air, so I can easily do this. Others couldn't do it, but it didn't mean that Long Yang couldn't do it. After comprehending the law of air, Long Yang could secretly inject his spiritual energy into the enemy's body through the air without any obstruction. Then, this spiritual energy would turn into countless sharp blades in the enemy's body, cutting into the enemy's meridians and dantian inch by inch. It should be known that the human body didn't only breathe through the mouth and nose, the countless pores on the body also breathed, and there was no way to control it. But after comprehending the law of air, Long Yang could easily inject spiritual energy into the enemy's body without any difficulty. Feeling the gradually increasing pain in his body, as well as the rapid suppression of his spiritual energy, Xinyuan Baijian's face became extremely ugly. Only now did he softly experience the terror of the top 3 on the saint rankings. It was no wonder that the world acknowledged that the top 3 on the saint rankings were on a completely different level from the other saints on the saint rankings. This sentence wasn't wrong at all. Not to mention how strong Long Yang was. Just the fact that he had comprehended the law of air was enough to make many people helpless. Such a powerful law of air was enough to make Long Yang a nightmare for countless people. Of course, Long Yang's strength definitely wasn't limited to just this, as he was ranked 3rd on the saint rankings. As soon as his voice fell, Long Yang turned his head to look at Feng Zhu and said, "Make your move. It'll be much easier to kill him now." After saying that, a towering aura suddenly erupted from Long Yang's body. The appearance of this aura made everyone present dumbfounded. Some people even directly sat down on the ground and said with a dull expression, "That's Saint stage cultivation." That's right, at this moment, Long Yang's cultivation had clearly reached the Saint realm, which was half a realm higher than Xianyuan Baijian and Feng Zhu's half-step Saint realm cultivation. Even Xiao Chan was shocked by Long Yang's cultivation at this time. Long Yang had revealed his cultivation before, and he was only at the half-step Saint realm. But now, he had leaped to become a Saint realm expert. Moreover, he hadn't just entered the Saint realm, but had at least reached the Saint realm small perfection. Obviously, Long Yang hadn't just broken through to the Saint realm. There was only one explanation, and that was that Long Yang had been hiding his cultivation all this time. His true cultivation had already reached the Saint realm from the beginning. There was actually someone who could break through to the Saint realm at such a young age. One must know that even the top 10 on the Saint rankings were all half-step saints. Everyone was shocked. Even Yin Yangzi and the other experts of the Taiyang sect in the sky couldn't believe it. How could such a young Saint realm expert be possible? Long Yang's expression didn't change much when he sensed the surprise of the people around him. He just smiled helplessly and said, "What's so strange about this? Aren't the other 2 monsters also in the Saint realm? Brothers begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, begging for collections." Chapter 1340. Not only did he comprehend the terrifying law of air, but his cultivation had also reached the Saint realm. In the younger generation, there was actually someone who had reached the Saint realm. This was something that no one had dared to imagine before. However, now that they had seen Long Yang's true cultivation with their own eyes, they finally understood why the people said that the top 3 on the Saint ranking were monsters that could completely crush the other saints on the Saint ranking. This saying was not without reason. The terrifying aura from Long Yang's body constantly attacked the hearts of everyone present. And Xianyuan Baijian, who was facing Long Yang, had an extremely serious expression. He was definitely not Long Yang's opponent, and Long Yang definitely had the ability to kill him. Long Yang's cultivation had already suppressed him. Moreover, Long Yang's strength did not only lie in his cultivation and law of air. Long Yang was definitely not weak in other aspects. He was definitely not Long Yang's opponent. This was the only thought in Xianyuan Baijian's mind. Facing the shock of the surrounding people, Long Yang helplessly curled his lips and said, "Sai, this is really troublesome." In order to kill Xianyuan Baijian, Long Yang had no choice but to use his true cultivation. This was why Long Yang felt that it was troublesome. But at this point, there was nothing to say. Since Feng Zhu wanted to kill Xianyuan Baijian, what could Long Yang say? Emitting a terrifying aura from his body, Long Yang's gaze fell on Xianyuan Baijian. He slowly stretched out his right hand and pressed down on Xianyuan Baijian from afar. Shake! Immediately, an azure dragon claw formed by spiritual energy descended from the sky, fiercely suppressing Xianyuan Baijian. The power of this palm had already surpassed Xianyuan Baijian's limit. Facing this gigantic dragon claw that was emitting a dense azure light, Xianyuan Baijian wanted to escape, but the surrounding area was filled with Feng Zhu's law of undying flames, making it impossible for Xianyuan Baijian to escape. He could only helplessly watch as the azure dragon claw mercilessly suppressed him. Without a doubt, if Long Yang's attack landed, Xinyuan Baijian would definitely be heavily injured if not killed. The dignified first holy prince of a human race, under the joint attack of Long Yang and Feng Zhu, was practically unable to retaliate. It could be said that he was in an extremely sorry state. The Cyan Dragon Claw violently moved towards the fighting stage. At that critical moment, when everybody thought that Xinyuan Baijian was going to lose, a cold voice spread in the air. Immediately after, a white light flashed. The white light, which was only as thick as a finger, easily hit the green dragon claw. Then, Long Yang's green dragon claw instantly dissipated, as if it had been torn apart. At the last moment, someone stepped in to save Xinyuan Baijian. Following the disappearance of the Cyan Dragon Claw, an old man wearing a gray robe appeared in front of Xinyuan Baijian. The old man gave off a very ordinary feeling. Even his back was a little stooped. He looked like a very short and ordinary old man. Although his appearance was ordinary, no one dared to underestimate him as he stood there. The reason was simple. It was because of his identity. Xinyuan Wudi. Seeing the old man appear, Chun Ling, who was below the stage, said softly. His eyes flashed with hatred. It seemed that Chun Ling recognized Xinyuan Wudi. As soon as Chun Ling's voice fell, Yin Yangzi, who had been watching the show from the side, appeared on the stage and looked at Xinyuan Wudi with a smile. Brother Wudi, are you going to interfere in the affairs of the younger generation? Xinyuan Wudi, the ancestor of the Xinyuan family, was one of the great sage of the human race. His strength could be said to be on par with Yin Yangzi. Previously, when Xinyuan Wudi received the message from the 4 quasi-saint great sovereigns of the Xinyuan family, he immediately rushed over. Fortunately, by relying on the speed of a great sage emperor, which could be said to be akin to teleportation, he finally managed to catch up. Just now, it was Xinyuan Wudi who acted and saved Xinyuan Baijian. As the young master of the Xinyuan family, nothing could happen to Xinyuan Baijian. Therefore, Xinyuan Wudi naturally couldn't sit idly by. Protecting Xinyuan Baijian behind him, Xinyuan Wudi looked indifferently at Yin Yangzi, who had a faint smile on his face, and said calmly, I'm only here to take Baijian away. I have no intention of interfering. Xinyuan Wudi naturally wouldn't attack Long Yang and Feng Zhu unless he wanted to die together with them. Therefore, after saving Xinyuan Baijian, Xinyuan Wudi had no intention of attacking again. However, there was a trace of coldness in his eyes when he looked at Long Yang and Feng Zhu. Unfortunately, the two of them were chosen of the saint rankings. Moreover, the Dragon Clan and Huang Yi clan behind them weren't forces that the Xinyuan family could contend against. Therefore, Xinyuan Wudi could only give up on the idea of attacking. Being able to bring Xinyuan Baijian back safely was already the best result. Hearing Xinyuan Wudi's words, Yin Yangzi smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. Beside him, Long Yang and Feng Zhu also slowly withdrew their auras. Since Xinyuan Wudi had arrived, it was naturally impossible to kill Xinyuan Baijian today, unless Yin Yangzi was willing to restrain Xinyuan Wudi. However, that was obviously impossible. Although Yin Yangzi had always been on Xiao Chen's side, Long Yang and Feng Zhu were still members of the Beast Clan. Yin Yangzi could help them, but he definitely wouldn't fight Xinyuan Wudi to the death for them. After all, Xinyuan Wudi was the great sage of the human clan. At this moment, the 100-clan war was about to begin. The human clan could have small conflicts, but they absolutely couldn't kill each other, especially between the great sage. Therefore, Yin Yangzi definitely wouldn't attack Xinyuan Wudi. Knowing that it was impossible to kill Xinyuan Baijian, Long Yang didn't feel anything. However, Feng Zhu's face was full of unwillingness. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After all, this was the Taiyang sect of Tianyin, which was the territory of the human clan. It was already very difficult for Yin Yangzi to be willing to stand up and protect them. Xinyuan Wudi's timely arrival allowed Xianyuan Baijian to survive. However, today's matter had indeed made Xianyuan Baijian lose face. Without saying anything more, Xianyuan Wudi turned to look at Xianyuan Baijian and said indifferently, "Let's go." He didn't want to stay here for a moment longer. Hearing his ancestors' words, Xianyuan Baijian naturally didn't say anything more. However, before leaving, Xianyuan Baijian first looked at Long Yang and Feng Zhu with deep fear in his eyes. Then, he turned his gaze to Xiao Chun. The hatred in his eyes was extremely strong. At the same time, he said coldly, "Xiao Chun, do you think there will always be someone who can protect you? At the Human Clan Assembly, I'd like to see who can stop you." With that, without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Xianyuan Baijian left with his ancestor. This time, the experts of the Taiyang sect of Tianyin didn't stop them and allowed them to leave. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1341. The experts from the Xianyuan clan left, but Chunling's expression was very ugly. To be more precise, it was because Chunling's expression had become extremely ugly after seeing Xianyuan Wudi. Sensing the change in Chunling, Xiao Chun had already arrived beside the Sacred Palace group. He did not ask any questions. After all, there were too many people here, and it was not the time to talk about such things. However, based on Chunling's identity, Xiao Chun could guess that Chunling and the current ancestor of the Xianyuan clan, Xianyuan Wudi, probably knew each other. There might even be some sort of relationship between the two. Chunling's expression did not change much. With the departure of the Xianyuan clan, the battle of life and death between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiuran finally came to an end. The process could be said to be full of twists and turns, and the result could be said to be unexpected. However, Bai Qiuran's death and Xianyuan Baijian's retreat were indisputable facts. It could be said that Xiao Chun had finally achieved his goal today. Therefore, at this very moment, the gazes of many disciples were locked onto Xiao Chun. They all knew that after this battle, Xiao Chun would firmly replace Bai Qiuran's position in the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect and become one of the two chosen on the saint rankings. Under everyone's gazes, the familiar light screen appeared in the sky once more. Xiao Chen's name, which was originally ranked 102nd on the saint rankings, emitted a burst of light and quickly replaced Bai Qiuran's 93rd position. After killing Bai Qiuran with his own hands, Xiao Chun naturally replaced him on the saint ranking. As for Bai Qiuran's name, it was only natural that her name was removed from the saint ranking due to Xiao Chen's death. Following the change in Xiao Chen's ranking, the saint rankings also changed once more. The various clans of the Central World were the first to learn of this change. After all, every time the saint rankings light screen appeared, everyone in the Central World could see it clearly no matter where they were. They had already paid special attention to Xiao Chun, the new son of the human race on the saint ranking. In just a few days, Xiao Chun had risen from the 102nd place to the 93rd place on the saint ranking. This made the cultivators of the 100 races pay even more attention to him. At the same time, some quickly guessed that Bai Qiuran was probably dead because his name had vanished from the hallowed rankings. There was only a single explanation for that. Bai Qiuran was dead, and Xiao Chun had taken her place. It was obvious who had killed Bai Qiuran. Countless people guessed the whole story. Some were shocked, some were indifferent, and some were disdainful. Of course, there were also people who were furious. In White Moon City, in the Bai family's mansion, the patriarch and father of Bai Qiuran and Bai Qiwa, Bai Mushuang, sat in the main hall with a gloomy face. His expression was so gloomy that it was somewhat ferocious as he looked at the experts of the Bai family below him. He gritted his teeth and spoke word by word. "Qiuran is dead, and it's that damned Xiao Chun again. He's killed 2 of my sons. Bai Mushuang, will definitely kill him." How could Bai Mushuang not be furious that both his sons had died at the hands of Xiao Chun? His heart was already filled with rage. If it were not for the slightest bit of rationality left in him, he probably would have killed his way to the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin long ago. Bai Mulin sighed silently when he heard that. Out of everyone present, he was the only one who had seen Xiao Chun with his own eyes. He knew how talented Xiao Chun was. He originally thought that the Bai family had taken Xiao Chun seriously enough, but who would have thought that they would still underestimate Xiao Chen's strength in the end? Even Xinyuan Baijian had failed to save Bai Qiran's life. The Bai family naturally knew that Bai Qiran had contacted Xinyuan Baijian. They originally thought that with Xinyuan Baijian holding the fort, Bai Qiran's life would not be in danger even if something unexpected happened. Who would have thought that Bai Qiran would still die in the end? It could be said that Xiao Chun had single-handedly destroyed the hope of the entire Bai family. Without Bai Qiran, there was no one in the younger generation of the Bai family who could carry the banner of the Bai family. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to the Bai family. As the cold shout rang out, the faces of the Bai clan's experts turned cold. At the same time, Bai Mulin, who had been silent all this while, spoke in a deep voice. "Big brother, we can either not provoke Xiao Chun, or we have to give him a thunderous blow. We can't give him any time to grow." Bai Mulin knew how fast Xiao Chun grew. Now that Bai Qiran was dead, the Bai family only had two choices. The first was to forget the enmity of the past, or even stop thinking about revenge, and take the initiative to befriend Xiao Chun. Perhaps this way, they might be able to bury the hatchet. Besides that, if the Bai family wanted to avenge Bai Qiran, then Bai Mulin believed that they had to kill Xiao Chun with a thunderous blow. They absolutely could not allow Xiao Chun any time to grow after becoming enemies with Bai Qiran. Otherwise, the entire Bai family would fall into eternal damnation. They could either swallow their anger and take the initiative to make peace, or they could strike like a thunderous blow and kill Xiao Chun in a single strike. This was the advice Bai Mulin gave Bai Mushuang. Killing intent surged in Bai Mushuang's eyes when he heard his younger brother's words. Take the initiative to make peace? I've already said that if I don't kill Xiao Chun, how can I face my children, Qiran and Qiuyue? It was definitely impossible to make peace, so they had to strike like a thunderous blow and kill Xiao Chun in a single strike. Bai Mulin said solemnly, "If that's the case, big brother, you have no choice but to make a decision. Xiao Chun is now a chosen on the saint rankings. There aren't many people in the younger generation who can kill him, so our Bai family can only pay a price and have the older generation take action and kill him with a thunderous blow." Xiao Chun's strength was naturally something that only 5 people in the younger generation of the Bai family could match. Therefore, Bai Mulin's idea was very simple. He wanted the older generation of the clan to kill Xiao Chun. Although the person who did this would definitely pay with his life for Xiao Chun and be punished by the heavenly way, there was no other way. Since they were going to make a move, they couldn't give Xiao Chun the slightest chance. Bai Mushuang didn't immediately agree to Bai Mulin's suggestion. In order to kill Xiao Chun, they would need at least a saint. Moreover, one saint wasn't enough. They would need at least 2. Using the lives of 2 saints to exchange for Xiao Chun's life was a hefty price for the Bai clan. After all, there were not many saints in the Bai clan. The death of one saint meant one less saint in the Bai clan. After weighing the pros and cons, Bai Mushuang finally decided to kill Xiao Chun. He couldn't swallow his anger if he didn't vent it. Seeing the change in Bai Mushuang's expression, Bai Mulin naturally guessed his elder brother's decision. At the same time, Bai Mulin's words shocked Bai Mushuang again. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1342. In Bai Mushuang's opinion, exchanging the lives of 2 saints for Xiao Chun's life was already an extremely painful matter. However, Bai Mushuang gritted his teeth and accepted it for the sake of avenging his sons. But right when he just made his decision, Bai Mushuang's expression couldn't help but change when he heard Bai Mushuang's words. "Big brother, since you made your decision, then in my opinion, we need at least 5 saints and a few dozen half-saints and Dao Emperor Realm cultivators to ensure that we can kill Xiao Chun. Only then would we have absolute confidence in killing Xiao Chun." After knowing Bai Mushuang's decision, Bai Mushuang expressed his opinion. Once those words were spoken, Bai Mushuang's expression changed. However, Bai Mushuang clearly didn't know that Bai Mushuang originally wanted to say that it was best to let a quasi-saint Grand Exalt do it. But when he thought about it, the Bai clan only had 3 quasi-saint Grand Exalts, so it was obviously impossible to exchange their lives for Xiao Chen's life. Even if Bai Mushuang agreed, the Bai clan's ancestor wouldn't. So, after taking a step back, Bai Mushuang still felt that it was impossible for a quasi-saint Grand Exalt to exchange his life for Xiao Chen's. In that way, they could only use the lives of saints. But even so, the outcome still shocked Bai Mushuang to the extreme. It wasn't just him. The gazes of all the experts of the Bai clan were filled with surprise and bewilderment as they looked at Bai Mushuang. Third brother, aren't you making a mountain out of a molehill? Does killing Xiao Chun require such a formidable force? Bai Mushuang asked with shock as he gazed at Bai Mushuang. The Bai clan had to pay the price of at least 5 saints, a few dozen half-saints, and Dao Emperor realm experts just to kill Xiao Chun. Wasn't this a little too exaggerated? After all, such a force was practically a fifth of the Bai clan's entire combat strength. At the very most, the Bai clan only had a little over 20 saints, and this was the result of accumulating strength for countless years. Yet they had to lose 5 of them in one go. Even if it wasn't a calamity to the Bai clan, it was sufficient to deal a heavy blow. He felt that Bai Mulin was making a mountain out of a molehill. However, Bai Mulin said solemnly to the doubts of his elder brother and everyone present, "Big brother, everyone, I'm not making a mountain out of a molehill, nor am I exaggerating. I've seen Xiao Chun with my own eyes. It can be said that if a saint attacks, Xiao Chun will definitely be able to kill him. If 2 saints attack, Xiao Chun will definitely be able to retreat safely. Even if 3 or 4 saints attack, they might not be able to kill Xiao Chun. And we only have one chance. If we don't succeed this time, then given how much the Yin and Yang sects value Xiao Chun, our Bai clan won't have another chance. Everyone just think about it. If you offend a current prodigy but fail to kill him before he has matured, what will the outcome be? At that time, our Bai clan probably won't just pay the price of 5 saints. Our entire Bai clan will probably cease to exist. After this incident, Bai Mulin's attention to Xiao Chun could be said to have risen to a very high level. Therefore, he believed that if he wanted to kill Xiao Chun, he must be willing to pay the price. Otherwise, he would only go for wool and come home shorn. At that time, Xiao Chun would definitely retaliate. Once Xiao Chun matured, the Bai clan would clearly not be able to endure Xiao Chen's revenge. Putting everything else aside, once Xiao Chun gained a foothold in the Yin and Yang sects, the Bai clan's days would become very difficult. At that time, Xiao Chun would only need to say a single word, and many organizations would probably step forward to deal with the Bai clan for Xiao Chun. His tone was very solemn, and he didn't seem to be joking at all. Bai Mushuang and the other members of the Bai clan fell into deep thought when they heard Bai Mulin. Bai Mulin was right. They only had one chance. Presently, Xiao Chun and the Yin and Yang sect were still unaware that the Bai clan intended to take revenge on Xiao Chun, so they weren't on guard. Once they attacked, and Xiao Chun was allowed to escape, then it would be very difficult to find another opportunity. The Yin and Yang sects would definitely dispatch forces to protect Xiao Chun. At that time, the Bai clan wouldn't have any chance to act. They had to succeed in a single strike, otherwise the Bai clan would definitely suffer annihilation. After pondering deeply for a short while, Bai Mushuang gritted his teeth and decided in the end. We'll do as third brother says. However, I've decided to dispatch 7 saints, 30 half-saints, and 70 Dao emperors to kill Xiao Chun. We must succeed in a single strike. The enmity of his son's death had gained the upper hand in the end, and Bai Mushuang spoke coldly. Moreover, he'd even added the strength to kill Xiao Chun on top of Bai Mulin's strength. 7 saints, 30 half-saints, and 70 Dao emperors. All of them were acting solely for the sake of killing Xiao Chun. Moreover, once they made a move against Xiao Chun, then it was no surprise that all 107 of them would definitely perish. Using the lives of 107 experts in exchange for Xiao Chun's life clearly showed how deep Bai Mushuang's hatred towards Xiao Chun was. Bai Mushuang made the decision. The curtains to a trap that was meticulously planned by the Bai clan to target Xiao Chun had silently begun. However, Xiao Chun was utterly unaware of all of this. At this moment, after Xiao Chun killed Bai Qiran and forced Xianyuan Baijian to retreat, they'd returned to the cave and gathered together to chat with each other. Bai Qiran was dead, so all of them were naturally much more relaxed. From now onwards, the Sacred Palace faction could be said to possess the right to speak in the heavenly Yin-Yang sect. It was even to the extent that the Sacred Palace faction had become a faction that was second only to the main faction after this battle. The reason was very simple. Besides the main faction, only the Sacred Palace faction possessed a chosen on the Hallowed rankings. The other factions didn't possess a chosen on the Hallowed rankings. They heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. At the same time, they naturally drank to celebrate Xiao Chen's ascension onto the Hallowed rankings. The atmosphere was very lively. Long Yang chuckled as he sat by Xiao Chen's side during the banquet. A wretched smile hung on the corners of his mouth as he gazed at the busy Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan, Si Ju, and Lu Zhu. Qing Yao and Qing Luo are getting more and more beautiful. Long Yang purposely put on a lecherous expression, but Xiao Chun didn't mind at all. He merely rolled his eyes at Long Yang. However, it was Feng Ju who spoke up. Xiao Chun, it looks like Xianyuan Baijian has his eyes on you this time. I'm afraid he won't stop targeting you in the future. Xianyuan Baijian wasn't a match for Long Yang and Feng Ju, so he naturally shifted his hatred onto Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun naturally knew this, but before Xiao Chun could reply, Long Yang spoke up nonchalantly. Only mediocre people don't attract jealousy. It's very normal for Xianyuan Baijian to target Brother Xiao Chun, but I'm sure Brother Xiao Chun won't mind, right? We'll just deal with whatever comes our way. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1343. Xianyuan Baijian had revealed killing intent toward Xiao Chun before he left. Even an idiot could tell that he hated Xiao Chun. Since he wasn't a match for Long Yang and Feng Ju, Xianyuan Baijian naturally blamed everything on Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun felt rather helpless about this. What was this? Bullying the weak and fearing the strong? However, this was also normal. Xianyuan Baijian clearly wasn't an idiot. Thus, blaming everything on Xiao Chun was also something to be expected. Long Yang didn't care about this at all. In Long Yang's opinion, Xiao Chun would replace Xianyuan Baijian as the first holy son of the human race sooner or later. When Yun Kunyo had taken the initiative to come to Long Yang to discuss an alliance, Long Yang had already said that it wasn't impossible for the holy sons of the beast race and human race to form an alliance. However, Yin Kunyo wasn't qualified to discuss it, and neither was Xianyuan Baijian. From Long Yang's point of view, the alliance between the chosen of the beast race and the human race could only be discussed after Xiao Chun replaced Xianyuan Baijian's position. Long Yang was only willing to discuss this matter with Xiao Chun. Xianyuan Baijian and Yun Kunyo were not qualified. Disregarding everything else, just in terms of talent, Long Yang completely crushed the two of them. If they weren't on the same level, what was there to discuss? Hearing Long Yang's words, Xiao Chun unhappily scolded. That's hard to say. Right now, I'm not a match for Xianyuan Baijian. If he comes looking for trouble, I'll have to trouble Brother Long Yang first. Xiao Chen's words were clearly a joke, but at the same time, it was also a fact. Indeed, if Xiao Chun and Xianyuan Baijian were to clash head-on, Xiao Chun definitely wouldn't be able to win. Thus, during this period of time, Xiao Chun didn't hesitate to hug Long Yang's thigh. In any case, Long Yang couldn't refuse. If he didn't agree, then he could go find his second sister, Long Qing, and have Long Qing talk to the Dragon Emperor. It could be said that he had a death grip on Long Yang's lifeline. Hearing this, Long Yang fiercely drank a mouthful of wine and said, "You don't want me to stay by your side forever, do you? Doesn't that make me a personal bodyguard? That's not necessary. How would I dare to restrict Brother Long Yang's freedom? It's fine as long as you help me when you're by my side. As for when you're not around, I naturally won't be so stupid as to fight to the death with Xinyuan Baijian. After all, people take turns. It's fine to let him be arrogant for a few years." Xiao Chen laughed. As he spoke, Xiao Chen glanced at Chun Ling, who had been drinking alone in the corner of the courtyard. After greeting Long Yang and the others, he walked over to Chun Ling with a jug of wine. Ever since Xianyuan Wudi appeared, Chun Ling's mood seemed to be very low. Walking over to Chun Ling's side, Xiao Chen minded his own business and poured a cup of wine for each of them. Then he clinked his cup with Chun Ling's and drank it all in one gulp. After the wine entered his stomach, Xiao Chen breathed out a mouthful of wine in comfort. Very naturally, he sat beside Chun Ling and asked in a seemingly casual manner, "Big brother, do you know the Xianyuan ancestor?" Naturally, there was no need for the brothers to beat around the bush. Therefore, Xiao Chen asked very naturally. Hearing this, Chun Ling had no intention of hiding anything. He smiled and slowly said, "My real name is Xianyuan Wudi. I should say in my previous life, my name was Xianyuan Ling. I've told you and second sister before that I was once one of the 3 great elders of the Xianyuan clan. My cultivation base was at the limit of the half-saint great sovereign. My battle strength could also be said to be at the strongest level among the half-saint great sovereigns. At that time, Xianyuan Wudi had yet to break through to the great sage realm. Like me, he was also one of the 3 great elders. Back then, both of us were ranked on the holy rankings. Although our rankings weren't high and were only in the 80th place, we were still considered to be outstanding talents. As we were cousins and grew up together, my relationship with Xianyuan Wudi was very good since we were young. But I didn't expect that he actually... Speaking until here, Chun Ling paused. A glint of hatred flashed in his eyes. Then, he took a big gulp of wine and continued, but his voice was obviously much hoarser. After becoming one of the 3 great elders of the Xianyuan clan, I met a woman. She was a peerless beauty and was an elder of the Haotian Alliance. It was a coincidence that we met, but after getting along with each other, we fell in love with each other. After getting together with her, the 3 of us, she, Xianyuan Wudi, and I often traveled together to search for the possibility of breaking through to the great sage. Xianyuan Wudi knew that I loved her very much, but no one expected that when we went out to train, the 3 of us accidentally broke into a ruin. There we found some records and treasures about breaking through to the great sage. Who would have thought that Xianyuan Wudi would want to kill me and her in the face of such an opportunity? However, the 3 of us are equal in strength. It's clearly impossible for Xianyuan Wudi to kill me and her by himself. So, Xianyuan Wudi poisoned us with 100 ghosts devouring heart powder. It was a highly toxic poison of the ghost clan. No one below the great sage could resist it. Even 100 poisons' impenetrable body was useless. At that time, I treated Xianyuan Wudi as a brother and didn't guard against him at all. So, it was easy for Xianyuan Wudi to succeed. She was poisoned and unconscious. I wanted to fight with Xianyuan Wudi, but we couldn't do anything to each other. In the end, Xianyuan Wudi told me that the Dragon Clan could save her, but she had been poisoned by the 100 ghosts devouring heart powder. She only had half a month at most. She asked me if I wanted to fight to the death with him here. At that time, I really wanted to kill Xianyuan Wudi, but she didn't have time. In the end, I took her out of the secret realm and went to the Beast Clan. After that, the incident with the Dragon Clan happened. Chun Ling said slowly. After hearing this, Xiao Chen finally understood Chun Ling's secret. To put it bluntly, if it wasn't for Xianyuan Wudi, Chun Ling wouldn't have been reborn, and he wouldn't have been stranded in the Northern Star Realm's Tianshan continent. In order to break through to the Great Sage, Xianyuan Wudi betrayed his brother, causing Chun Ling to almost die. But now, it seemed that Xianyuan Wudi had succeeded because he was now the ancestor of the Xianyuan clan, the Great Sage. Xiao Chen did not know how to comfort Chun Ling sitting beside Chun Ling. Xiao Chen also finished the wine in his cup in one gulp. Then, he poured another cup for the 2 of them and said in a calm voice, "Big brother, if you want to do anything, just do it. Second sister and I will always be behind you. Even if you want to overthrow the entire Xianyuan clan, second sister and I will definitely not be absent. Xiaochen didn't try to persuade Qinling. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to forget this kind of thing. As a brother, the only thing he could do was stand by Qinling's side. No matter what happened, he would stand firmly by Qinling's side. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1344. Xiaochen didn't say much after learning about Qinling's experience back then. He simply stayed by Qinling's side. When Qinling heard Xiaochen's words, he turned his head, and the two brothers looked at each other. Qinling then raised his wine cup and drained it with Xiaochen. All right, let the three of us turn the Xianyuan clan upside down. I must give her an explanation for what happened back then. Qinling had lived 2 lives, but he had only loved one person from beginning to end, and that was her. Her name was Xia Qingchen. Xianyuan Ling hadn't been able to save her in his previous life, so Qinling would seek justice for her in this life. He knew what Qinling meant. If he wanted to seek justice for Xia Qingchen, he would have to face Xianyuan Wudi directly. Xianyuan Wudi was the ancestor of the Xianyuan clan. Going against him was equivalent to going against the entire Xianyuan clan. But so what? Xiaochen wasn't afraid of the Xianyuan clan. Although the 3 siblings were only 3 grasshoppers in front of the Xianyuan clan right now, there would be a day when Xiaochen and the other 2 would be able to single-handedly overthrow the entire Xianyuan clan. That night, everyone drank merrily. But the happiest of all would naturally be Long Qi and Long Kuei. It was the first time the 2 sisters had left the Dragon Clan, and now that they had so many friends, they naturally had a lot of fun. In the end, the 2 of them were drunk to the point of unconsciousness. It was Qing Yao and Qing Luo who helped them sleep. After a night of revelry and by Chiron's death, the Sacred Palace faction's life quickly returned to normal. Everyone was working hard on their cultivation. It had been some time since they joined the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, and the Sacred Palace faction had gradually adapted to life in the Central World in the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Moreover, under the influence of the rich martial arts culture in the Central World, the Sacred Palace faction's strength had also improved by leaps and bounds. Not to mention others, just Qinling, Long Qing, and Qinyu already possessed the qualifications to ascend the saint rankings. Their strength was absolutely not inferior to Long Yu, who had once fought with Xiaochen. He already possessed the strength to ascend the saint ranking. However, the 3 of them were clearly not too concerned about this. The saint ranking held no attraction to them, especially Qinyu. Qinyu's laziness was even more exaggerated than Long Yang's. Perhaps it was because of their similar personalities that after a few days, Long Yang and Qinyu were like 2 brothers. It was a pity that they hadn't met earlier. Every day, the 2 of them would be drinking in the courtyard, paying no attention to anything else. Once again immersed in cultivation, everyone's days were peaceful and fulfilling. As for Xiaochen, he naturally did not idle around. During the battle with Bai Qiran, he had luckily comprehended the sword domain. During this period of time, Xiaochen had spent most of his energy on consolidating his sword domain. It could be said that he had comprehended the sword domain by chance. Xiaochen's comprehension of the sword domain was definitely not proficient, and could even be said to be very shallow. However, this was not a big problem. Everything was difficult at the beginning. Now that he had comprehended the sword domain, he only needed to put in a little more effort to consolidate it. In just half a month, Xiaochen had successfully pushed his sword domain to the beginner level. Compared to before, he was obviously much more adept at using it. Strength was king. In the Central World, everything was based on strength. This was something that Xiaochen understood very well. More than half a month had passed, while Xiaochen was cultivating without hearing anything about the outside world. Late one night, Xiaochen was still cultivating in his room with his eyes closed as usual. The night was dark. However, in such an ordinary night, in an ordinary house in an inconspicuous village closest to the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect, 2 black-robed figures were sitting opposite each other. Through the faint light, One could see that these two people were actually by Mu Shuang and He Tao, the hall master of the heavenly yin-yang sect's mission hall. He Tao was the hall master of the mission hall of the heavenly yin-yang sect. With a cultivation of half-step great saint, he was considered a high-ranking figure in the heavenly yin-yang sect. However, at this moment, he was actually sitting together with Bai Mu Shuang. Moreover, from the looks of the two, this meeting should be extremely secretive. Apart from the two of them, no one else knew about it. Logically speaking, Bai Mu Shuang couldn't be on the same level as He Tao in terms of status and cultivation. However, the old ancestor of the Bai family and He Tao had some friendship. Of course, this friendship could also be understood as some blackmail. After all, as a major figure in the heavenly yin-yang sect, it was impossible for He Tao to be completely unscathed. And these things happened to have the shadow of the Bai family in them. Therefore, with these things, the Bai family and He Tao naturally became nominal allies. The Bai family would look for He Tao if they couldn't handle anything in the heavenly yin-yang sect. Sometimes, if He Tao wanted to do something shady, he would also use the Bai family to deal with it. The two sides could be said to be using and relying on each other. Sitting opposite each other, He Tao looked at Bai Mu Shuang in front of him and said faintly, "Tell me, what is it that can make you come to me personally?" Last night, He Tao had received a secret letter from Bai Mu Shuang, asking him to meet here tonight. He didn't know what Bai Mu Shuang was up to, but since Bai Mu Shuang had personally come here, it seemed that this matter wasn't going to be simple. He Tao had already guessed it. Hearing He Tao's words, Bai Mu Shuang's eyes flashed with killing intent. Then he said coldly, "It's not difficult. I just want Master He to do me a favor and force Xiao Chun to leave the heavenly yin-yang sect alone. It's best if he goes to a place where there are no people. Give Xiao Chun a mandatory mission, and it would be best if he had to go to a place where no one would go." As soon as Bai Mu Shuang said this, He Tao immediately understood what he meant. The Bai family wanted to make a move on Xiao Chun. They didn't have a chance in the heavenly yin-yang sect, so they wanted to do it while Xiao Chun was out on a mission. It was indeed a vicious plan, but the target was Xiao Chun. This made He Tao's face sink. He said coldly, "Bai Mu Shuang, does your Bai family want to die? Don't you know Xiao Chun's current status? I can guarantee that if your Bai family dares to make a move on Xiao Chun, once this matter is exposed, even that old man Bai Zhan won't be able to protect your Bai family." The Bai family was simply too audacious. Xiao Chun's current status was already known to everyone, and the importance that Yin Yangzi attached to Xiao Chun was obvious to all. If anyone dared to attack Xiao Chun at this time, they could imagine the consequences even if they used their toes to think. If Yin Yangzi, a great Saint Emperor, was angered, even 10 Bai families wouldn't be able to withstand it, let alone a single Bai family. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1345. The Bai clan actually wanted to assassinate Xiao Chun, which was simply courting death. As soon as he finished speaking, He Tao rejected without hesitation, "Impossible. I will not issue such a mission. I also advise the Bai clan to give up on this idea. Otherwise, the Bai clan will not be able to bear the consequences." He Tao was not a fool to participate in the assassination of Bai clan Xiao Chun. Naturally, he would not agree. Bai Mu Shuang was not surprised when he heard He Tao's words. He seemed to have expected He Tao to answer like this. The corner of his mouth revealed a sneer. This sneer seemed a little crazy. He Tao couldn't help but frown slightly. "Master He, my Bai clan only needs you to arrange a mission for Xiao Chun. As for the rest, you don't need to show up. Even if they investigate, they won't be able to trace it back to you. Moreover, with our relationship, Master He is so heartless. This is a little hurtful. At that time, it's hard to guarantee that those things won't fall into the hands of Punishment Hall's Qin Guang. With Qin Guang's character, Master He should know what it means if those things fall into his hands." In order to take revenge, Bai Mu Shuang could be said to have thrown caution to the wind. He even did not hesitate to threaten He Tao. As for the Qin Guang mentioned by Bai Mu Shuang, He was really the master of Punishment Hall of Heavenly Yin-Yang sect. Although he was also a half-step great sage like He Tao was far from being Qin Guang's opponent in terms of personal strength and authority. The gap between the two was not small. Hearing Bai Mushuang's words, He Tao's face immediately sank. He shouted coldly, "Bai Mushuang, are you threatening me?" "Master," he misunderstood. "How dare I threaten you? I just need a small favor from Master He. I hope Master He won't refuse." Bai Mushuang smiled ferociously when he heard He Tao's words. All He Tao needed to do was to arrange a mission for Xiao Chun. As for the rest, he didn't need to do it. The missions of Heavenly Yin-Yang sect were divided into two categories. One was the mission that one had to take the initiative to accept, and the other was the compulsory mission. It was easy to understand the free mission that one took the initiative to accept. It was free to choose. There was no coercion. After completing the mission, the disciple would get the corresponding reward. As for the second type of compulsory missions, to put it bluntly, they were some special missions that had to be completed by the designated personnel of the mission hall. Once such a mission was issued, under normal circumstances, the disciples would not be able to refuse. For example, if the difficulty of a mission exceeded the scope of an ordinary disciple, the mission hall would categorize it as a compulsory mission, and it required the holy disciples of the holy rankings to take action. In that case, regardless of whether they found Xiao Chun or Yun Kunyo, both of them would have to accept this mission. As Bai Mushuang had said, given He Tao's status, it was not strange for him to arrange a compulsory mission for Xiao Chun. Of course, even if that was the case, He Tao did not want to agree to Bai Mushuang's request. The reason was that it was very dangerous. If it was an ordinary disciple, He Tao would definitely not hesitate or worry. However, his target was Xiao Chun. He knew very well that if Xiao Chun died, the matter would definitely not end well. The upper echelons of the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect, whether it was Yin Yangzi or Qin Guang of the Punishment Hall, would definitely investigate to the end. At that time, if they found any clues, He Tao would definitely be dead. However, He Tao did not seem to have any other choice. If he did not agree to Bai Mushuang's request, he would definitely die once the Bai family's things fell into Qin Guang's hands. If he helped, he might be able to escape by luck. However, if he did not help, it would only be a life and death struggle. It wasn't that he didn't think of killing Bai Mushuang on the spot. But what was the use of killing Bai Mushuang? Those things obviously wouldn't be with Bai Mushuang. And once Bai Mushuang died, someone from the Bai family would naturally hand those things over to Qin Guang. There was no other choice. After pondering for a long time, He Tao finally said coldly, "Fine, I can help you. However, this is the last time. After this matter, those things must be handed over to me. From then on, I will no longer have any relationship with the Bai family." In the end, He Tao chose to agree. However, he also stated his own conditions. Those things could not be in the Bai family's hands. Otherwise, he would be threatened by the Bai family for the rest of his life. He Tao had even decided that as long as the Bai family handed those things over to him, he would find an opportunity to destroy the entire Bai family. Only dead people could keep secrets the best. Hearing He Tao's words, Bai Mushuang did not hesitate. He immediately smiled and nodded. "Deal. May I know when Lord he can arrange it? Just wait for my news." Hearing this, He Tao coldly replied. Immediately, he disappeared from the spot. Tonight's meeting made He Tao very unhappy. However, he had no choice but to follow Bai Mushuang's request. Fortunately, he only needed to arrange a compulsory mission for Xiao Chun. As for the rest, he would leave it to the Bai family to deal with. He did not need to intervene at all, nor did he need to be involved in anything. No one knew about the secret meeting between He Tao and Bai Mushuang. 3 days had passed since that night. On this evening, Xiao Chun had just finished a day of cultivation. He was chatting with Qin Shiru and the other 3 girls in the garden. However, at this moment, Fei Mei walked in and bowed to everyone. "Young master, the people from the mission hall are here. They said that there is a compulsory mission that only the chosen on the saint list can accept. The mission hall has chosen young master. Compulsory mission? Hearing Fei Mei's words, Xiao Chen's expression did not change much. He asked indifferently, "Where is he?" "In the front hall," Fei Mei replied. It was normal for people from the mission hall to come. However, Xiao Chen did not realize that this seemingly ordinary compulsory mission was actually hiding something. Under Fei Mei's lead, Xiao Chen came to the front hall. Here, Xiao Chen saw a deacon from the mission hall. When he saw Xiao Chen, the deacon bowed respectfully. "Greetings, chosen Xiao Chen." As a chosen on the saint list, Xiao Chen's status was naturally not something a small deacon could compare with. Therefore, in front of Xiao Chen, the deacon was very respectful. Of course, the deacon obviously did not know that the compulsory mission in his hand was actually a trap set to kill Xiao Chen. Early in the morning, he received an order from He Tao saying that there was a mission that only the chosen on the saint list could complete. Since he and Kunyo did not have the time, he could only force Xiao Chen to handle it. The deacon did not have the slightest suspicion. After all, such matters were not uncommon in the mission hall. Therefore, after receiving the mission, the deacon did not look at the mission's content and directly went to Xiao Chen's cave dwelling. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.